And that great looking dessert. But we do appreciate the adjusting of the schedule because we do have a principal with us to share with you today. I first want to say, even though myself and Isaac will be presenting the report today, I do want to thank both the Career and Technical Education, ooh, that got on, CTE division here at the department, our North Carolina Community College partners, our UNC System office partners, as well as our North Carolina Independent Colleges and University partners. They all have helped with the data set here, and so we are so grateful for their partnership. This report actually officially this year combines two reports. We were able to get that ask that you all did. It combines both the Career and College Promise report with the Cooperative Innovative High School report now, which will be due on March 15th. This report meets great work in the context and not just the numbers. So we actually added that a couple of years ago as well. And so I hope as you looked over the data, you also read some of the stories because they really help us to remember why we are here and the potential of this incredible opportunity that we have for our students. I did want to go back through a little bit of the foundation of this because I know we have some new board members, and those of you that have been here a while, please bear with me, but I do want to make sure our new board members understand where this comes from. So in legislation, we offer a program called Career and College Promise, which allows for structured opportunities for high school students to access dual enrollment courses with the community colleges and select universities with our cooperative innovative high schools. So I just want to make sure you all are on board with that. Career and College Promise in our state has three primary pathways. We are developing a fourth one with Workforce Con Ed as well. We have the college transfer pathway and the career and technical education pathway, which is open to all eligible North Carolina high school students. That are those in our public schools, but also as well in our private and home schools as well. Those are two of the primary pathways along with Workforce Con Ed, which we are beginning. Then the third pathway are our cooperative innovative high schools, which are our, some people call them early colleges. They're named all sorts of different things, but in our legislation, our cooperative innovative high school programs. So we're first going to look at the first two pathways, which are representative across all of our high schools. So some of the data points that we are pleased to report is that last year, of all of the graduates, we had a little over 27% of students who enrolled in at least one dual enrollment course, primarily through CCP, in their high school years. So if we were to, and that does not include other college level courses, such like AP or IB. These are dual enrollment, either at a college or a university, 27.1. And that is an unduplicated count, to answer Mr. Hall's previous question at the other item, unduplicated. This represents over about 29,000 students. It was an increase from last year, from the graduating class of 17-18. And they enrolled in a total of 100. So those graduates enrolled in a total of 192,271 college courses over their high school years. So if we think about those numbers, that that is definitely something for us to be encouraged about, as well as to recognize this as a significant way we are serving our high school population. I do want to make a note that some of these numbers are a little different than last year's. We will be making a note of that in the report before we submit it. Our data this year is significantly more accurate due to the coding having improved over the years. So we're very confident that this number will hold and we'll be able to track it as we move forward. This is not necessarily part of a requirement of the report, but we did want to include this, and we disaggregated this in looking at your new strategic plan and your initiatives of equity and excellence. So we did disaggregate our students of our graduates by race and ethnicity. We did not disaggregate in any other way just yet. If the board would like us to, we can. And if you look at these numbers, which are in the report and here in the presentation, what you'll see is that we're incredibly encouraged with the initial data, in that while there still remains some disproportionality, having looked at disproportionality numbers in many different programs in our state, I will say these are less disproportional and more proportional than many other programs in our state. And so I'm very pleased from a racial and ethnic standpoint that students are accessing this program from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. If Dr. Oxendine was here, I have it highlighted on my report that she would be very pleased to see that this program is serving our Native population, as all of our populations in our public schools. I do believe there's always more work to do to make it more proportional, and we will continue to do that. But we're pleased and encouraged with this first outlook.
Before you move on, can I, one quick question here through
Yes,
this
ma'am.
equity lens. As great as these numbers are, is the lack of, there's no transportation to a community college for any student that wants, or is there? Is there a
depends.
barrier that
There may be. So a lot of school districts do work very hard to provide transportation. It is not a requirement, but it is encouraged. And with our cooperative innovative high schools, it is part of the application, so we're very aware of it. But general CCP courses, it's not a requirement. I do believe districts work very diligently to try to be responsive, but I would say I'm sure there are situations that we can continue to improve those barriers to access. As we'll discuss later on, also barriers to access textbooks and some other things that we can talk about.
Thank you.
Continuing on now, I want to share with you some of the data around earning credit. So the first numbers I talked to you about were enrollment, and then our number is 25.85% of all graduates earned credit through dual enrollment in their high school years. 95% of all graduates who enrolled in dual enrollment college courses earned credit towards high school. And high school students, according to the community college system, which they have reported to you for several years, do perform better than their typical student population in their schools. Now we're going to move to the Cooperative Innovative High School Pathway, which I brought to you, I think, in maybe December. The applications for Gaston, Early College of Medical Sciences. I'm not exactly sure what the title was, but I believe that was that. And so want to share with you some data here. So this year, currently, we have 131 cooperative innovative high schools that are open. Last year we had 134. We had our schools in Avery, which actually had been grandfathered in from an early small school initiative, like way back. They realized that they really are not meeting the program expectations like this. They had one school divided into three mini high schools and realized that they need to merge back in. So that's where that number is dropped. So if you can see, I know Ms. White wanted me to point out that they are representative of 85 school districts. Jeff, if he were here, he asked me to make sure you all also knew that it does represent 95 counties, is what the Office of the Governor has reported out to ensure access across the state. We have spoken to many of the districts that don't have one. Most of them, because you all asked me to do that last year, most of them, it has to do with they're just small districts. And so splitting a high school is not meaningful. Some of the larger ones feel like their career and college promise other pathways. They have really ramped those. programs up, and so don't feel like they need that, but we continue to nudge a few of them for that opportunity. Here are just some data points regarding cooperative innovative high schools. We are up in enrollment. We did dip a little bit in our graduate numbers, which fluctuates. We went up in our CTE credentials. This is all based on a self-report. We did go down in completion of associate degrees this past year. I think some of that has to deal with a lot of our schools are moving more towards CTE as well, which is great. But I do think that's an area we'll be discussing with our schools this summer to talk about, is that something that they're seeing also, and how can we ensure that we continue to make progress in that area. Our admissions to four-year institutions increased by 800 students. We're super pleased with that. So they're staying in our state. And then we also went up by 359 with our independent colleges and universities, which is wonderful when we see a lot more of our students staying in North Carolina. And of course, and you can read more in the report, generally the academic outcomes of these schools outpace all other traditional high schools, whether it be dropout rates, EOG, EOC, retention, etc. So you all know and have been great supporters of this program. And I do think there are areas to grow for this program, and we're going to discuss that after we continue to celebrate some stories. And so now I'd like to introduce Isaac Lake, our cooperative high school consultant, who will share with you some stories, and then we have a principal, and then I'll come back up to look at next steps.
Thank you, Sneha. Good afternoon, members of the board. We had over 80 success stories submitted by Cooperative Innovative High School principals this year. We really appreciate them doing that. It's not required. Of those, 36 are included in this year's report. And we believe that these stories show the diversity of school designs and also the innovative practices and really the diversity of students that are served by this vast network across the state. And so I'm just going to talk about 3 stories, and then it's my great pleasure to introduce one of the great principals from our network from Challenger Early College High School. This first story is from Caldwell Early College, and to me what this speaks to is both the high aspiration, the work ethic of this student, and also the difficult circumstance that she lived with during her high school career. And so I think that speaks to the grit, her own perseverance and accomplishment in achieving great things while working at the same time. And I think implicit in this, and these are just excerpts from the stories. You go to the report, you have the more information. But you see that she was homeless and that she, in fact, does not regret that. I find that extraordinary, and says that it's made her a better person. I think implicit here is the wealth of support that she received from Caldwell Early College, from the folks at Caldwell Early College, and that is indicative of schools across this network. Really, these small schools are especially designed to give kids a family, the feeling that people know them, care about them, and wish to support them. And so I think that's an example here. The next story is from Madison Early College. And you'll see here, this is a high-achieving student, an accelerated student. You know that these schools serve 3 target populations, students who would benefit from accelerated instruction, students who would be the first in their families to go to college, and students at risk of dropping out. So these stories show how all kinds of students benefit from the program. You see here that this student graduated early. She completed the Associate of Science degree at 17 years of age, but she, while doing that, held down multiple jobs and was a mentor and tutor for other students at the school. And she is currently attending UNC Chapel Hill at the age of 17. So grit, hard work, but also giving back to her school. Okay, I'm going to do one more, and that's from McDowell Early College. Here again is a student who was accelerated, but in spite of really challenging circumstances. And so you see that this student was taking care of her younger siblings without parents in the home. And nevertheless, and I do believe that this speaks to the support that this student received at McDowell Early College, completed her associate's degree, graduated as an 11th grader, and has been accepted at Appalachian State University. So again, acceleration in spite of truly difficult circumstances. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Fred Whalen. He is the principal of Challenger Early College, one of the great schools in our network, and he's got a great story. Fred.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Early colleges are definitely the best dropout prevention program we have. Absolutely. I mean, that's what these schools are meant for, and that's what they should be meant for. Just to give you some stats from our particular school, we purposely target where 70 to 80% of our kids are first generation. So we want to make sure that we're serving the right population and giving them a leg up. From that, we have a rate this past year of 95% associate rate, which is pretty amazing. We do this in 4 years. So I know some schools are 4 years, 5 years. We're actually a 4-year school, and we can get this done. We have 100% of our students got at least 2 years worth of college credit. So they may get the associate, but they still get the credit, which is amazing. And then obviously we've had a 100% graduation rate, which most schools have had for a long time, which just shows the success of the early college high schools. We have a lot of things in place at our school that most early colleges have. We have a PAA, or a mentoring program, stands for Personal Adult Advocate. So most schools have those sort of programs. We have targeted academic advising. We have, for us, we just started a required internship, so 100% of our students have to do an internship to graduate, and that's actually a new thing for us. They have to do community service, which is for most people. We have weekly whole school discussions as far as students are concerned. To actually target individual students, we can kind of do that because we have the small populations. It's a whole lot easier to do that. We have personalized learning, which most do in its classes. And then our county has really supported us for giving us extra support. So we've got an assistant principal, which most places don't, which we're very fortunate. We have 2 counselors. I know they're over here like, oh my gosh. I know. He's like, come on, man. Why? You guys are killing me. So we actually have 2 actual normal counselors, the mental health counselors at our school. Plus we use state money to pay for a academic advisor. So we have a lot of support. We even have a part-time social worker at our school. So we're very blessed. I just want to say that, to have all the support we have. And it definitely helps with the success rate, and I want to thank our county for doing all they have. Now, I was specifically, he actually asked me to talk about one particular student. It would have been really easy to talk about, let's be honest, all our students are, if they're graduating, they're worthy of consideration and worthy of talking about. I could have talked about a student. We had a student that is a Robertson Scholar that just got that scholarship, which is amazing. And if you know anything about Robertson Scholar, that's an almost impossible one to get, which basically a full ride to Duke and Carolina. We have one that was a LEDA Scholar who's going basically full ride to Princeton right now. And we have a student who is what's it called? It's a Questbridge Scholarship, which is also for first generation students, full ride to Washington University, which is pretty amazing. So it would have been really easy to talk about those kids, to talk about every kid that would graduate, but I want to talk about one particular kid. This kid's name is Brian, and I've actually brought pictures so you guys can see this guy. And I have to if you'll take a picture of me in a minute, because I promised him I would take a picture of me showing it. He wanted to come today, of me holding this picture up so you guys would see who it is. You want to take my picture too? So his name is Brian Vignettes. He graduated last year from us. He is 100% who these schools are supposed to help. He is a student who got really good recommendations from their teachers, and we value those recommendations from teachers more so than test scores. He was a kid that honestly, if he had gone to traditional school, and this is not a cut on traditional school, but if he had gone to a traditional school setting with a large number of people, he would have probably fallen in the wrong crowd and that sort of thing. It would have been sort of a tough situation for him. Fortunately, he came to us. He still was a little rough around the edges, and we had a lot of situations with him, and the one that I can think of particularly was him running from the cops with a beer. That's not what Challenger's about. But that's the kind of kid we're talking about. And he still hung out with the wrong crowd, so to speak, as we're, as he came to Challenger. So we had all these supports in place, and we also had a intervention with him where we literally brought in everybody that could possibly impact him, and had even a contract set out for him. And he sat in my office. He came to my office every single day when he didn't have class. He sat there and hung out with me. And I've never seen a kid turn around the way this kid did. He ended up graduating on time. So he graduated last year. So he went from running from the cops with a beer to being our mascot for the year. So he volunteered his senior year of high school to be our mascot and run around in this crazy outfit and dance with the cheerleaders, and he was amazing. I can't say enough good things about him. And now he is in the military serving our country. So like I said, it would have been easy to talk about the other kids. Those kids honestly probably would have been successful no matter what. But these schools are meant for this particular kid. So I know you guys know how good these programs are and how important they are. But I just want to put this kid out for consideration for a reason why we have these schools. So thank you very much.
I will also add that Challenger is not necessarily the smallest of our cooperative innovative high schools. It's not 100 students. It is 400 to 500 students. So for some districts, that's a large school. Maybe not where my child is, where there are 1,000, but for some, so I think why Isaac advocated for Fred to be the one to come talk to you today is of the school-wide success of completion, but also these, please don't kick me out. I can't go anywhere else. I won't make it. How even in a school of this size, which is smaller than some, but larger than a lot of others, how the right supports are in place. And yes, there are 2 counselors, but that shows you what you need to be able to do this work. To be able to do this work, you need quality, meaningful education. You need quality and meaningful supports for our students, as well as a quality and meaningful staff. So we can't thank Fred, principals like Matt, Tabari, and others for all of the work you all do. It's pretty remarkable. So with these stories, we do have next steps to think about as those of us leading this work. So we did have 114 out of 134 meet or exceed growth. So we're wondering though, what's going on with the other 20? You have these supports, some of them. You're in a smaller environment. What's going on that we have 20 not meeting growth, right? I want this program to continue to lead our state forward. And so these are the questions we're thinking about that we're going to have. Matt's actually going to be helping us with our institute this summer to have some of these conversations. We've been talking about this a lot, about what's the next, and Fred both, about what's the next phase of this work, right? And it's even to strengthen what JB and others started for us, right? And what the original principals did, and to keep growing and making these programs even smaller. We did have some less associate degree completion. So is it because of the CTE? Let's make sure that something is happening. Here we have 4 years, 95% receiving associate degree completion. Did I get that right? In 4 years. So if in 5 years we're not doing it, what's going on? What other things need to happen?
Can I mention one thing? We're changing a little bit to a CTE pathway as well for our kids. That way these kids like Brian have an opportunity. So ours will take maybe a little bit of a hit as well, and we're okay with that.
Yeah,
'Cause we
and
want
that's
best
okay.
for kids.
Mhm. That's right. But
And we've been encouraging schools to do that for a number of years. Many of the cooperative innovative high schools have expanded their pathways to having been traditionally in college transfer, the vast majority of their students, and now broadening access and personalizing pathways, something we've advocated for years.
so we want to look at that, right? And look at the career credentials as well as the associate degrees, make sure we're ensuring that the pathways are indeed connecting to their post-secondary plans. Now I want to go back out with CCP, with the program that we offer in all of our high schools. So while we grow, and it's an incredible opportunity, right? Reaching almost 30%. I think we're coming across some growing pains. I spent 3 hours last night working with the school, literally last night, working with the school district and in college, where it's growing pains. There's a new policy happening. There wasn't enough advising happening. The student got placed in something that's not going to work. How do we make this work? Luckily, we have lots of options. It's going to happen. But we get the calls that are pretty extreme, like a student who, in Thanksgiving, near Thanksgiving, the community college permits them to withdraw up to like around Thanksgiving at this one college. Well, so this student withdraws in November. Had that been spring, they're a senior, it was their English class. We then have no options on the high school side. So how are we ensuring, we have some schools and colleges that have done incredible work sharing progress monitoring. We have some where colleges are not sharing the grades with the schools. So as a result, if there's a student who's on the verge of failing, which will impact a student for their entire post-secondary career, not getting access to financial aid. Now, these are the extremes, but as this program continues to grow, I want to bring this to your attention that what we hopefully will be coming to you all with your support is some policy around infrastructure, around having to have an MOU. Having to have an MOU with certain things outlined, looking at more clear advising, because all of the situations that come up to us, right, or last night we dealt with for 2 days, has to deal with staffing. So we know that we don't have enough advising staff in most high schools. So is that something we need to think about long term? If this is a commitment of the General Assembly and us, is that something we need to think about? That if this is where we want to go, do we need additional staff in all of our high schools, not just in our cooperative innovative high schools? So these are some of the issues that the growing pains that I urge you to consider in supporting us moving forward with. I've also highlighted for you in the report on page, which is new, it's a new addition for you in this report that I think is longer than my thesis. On page 11, we do synthesize for you our situations of funding and of approval right now. So Halifax Early College that you approved 2 years ago has not yet been approved to even operate. They have opened as a typical high school, but soon they're going to need access to college courses. That Gaston hopefully will send forward, but those two have not been approved for funding, let alone opening. And then the 5 that don't have funding. So I've synthesized that for you to have that in your update, because I know we get a lot of questions about that on page 11 for that. The other piece that I think will help as we look at evaluation, that I'm going to wrap up, I know I'm close to my 25 to 28 minutes, is the CCP evaluation. We, for the last 3 years, have been applying in collaboration with the community college system, with a USDE grant with UNCG and the Serve Center on a major evaluation study, like a quasi-experimental design study, like big-time study. And so that, we were funded. We are still working on getting that staffing here. Hopefully, after several months of working on, we'll be able to get an additional staff member here. But we will be working with UNCG on a 5-year study to look at some deep evaluation of this program. And so next year, I hope they'll be here as well to share that information. So great success. But it's time now to really look at some of the growing pains, as well as the next phase of how we keep kicking it up a notch for this to be even a more incredible option for our students and our state of North Carolina.
Any questions from around the table?
If I could just make one observation, the logos on the bottom of these slides are significant. In Guilford County, we have 2 academies within the public schools. There are 3 early colleges and the community colleges in High Point, Jamestown, and Greensboro. There are 3 with the university system, and there are 3 with the independent colleges and universities. So these partners all are very meaningful, and the partnerships are genuinely excellent. So we should stop and laud the partners for what a great relationship it's brought about for many, many students.
And we meet monthly. So these partners, so it's not just in, in a report. We meet monthly, we talk regularly about these issues to continue to support the growth among the partners.
I do have a couple of questions. I'll just jump in. So a couple months ago, we heard from you that there had been a drop in the number of AP courses being taken in our high schools. And looking at the growth in these numbers, I have to ask the question, is there a connection between the two, do you think? Because I'm also hearing locally some concerns from parents along these lines, and I wonder just what your take is on that.
So I have so anecdotally, I do believe that there is some correlation. I'm happy to look at that further if that was something the board would like to do. I know you all mentioned that after this report you would think about that. I'm happy to do a survey to get some more information. But from what I have spoken to a lot of school districts and a lot of families, that has impacted. I do believe now that College Board and International Baccalaureate has a guaranteed credit acceptance at our schools that may impact the next year's numbers, but I do think that there is a lot of interest for lots of different reasons in our dual enrollment programming.
Well, and I guess sort of a follow-up to that. So just like IB and AP that we've had for many years, but in the case of CP, we're talking about a lot more courses that are taken that qualify for that meet our graduation requirements and course credits. And so my question is, because again, this sort of harkens back to how do we know that all of these courses meet our standards and our graduation requirements? And
Sure.
What comes to my mind is, Math 3, we know what that looks like if you take it in one of our traditional high schools. If you take the corresponding course, I don't know what it is, at the community college, do we know that those are equivalent in the content and what our students are taking with them?
So to answer your question with a couple of words, and then I'll expand, to a degree. So there are three types of courses that our students get access to. Some that do meet graduation requirements. We have a dual credit allowance sheet that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Some, then they have access to all courses that are on a transfer list. It's called the CAA. It's a Comprehensive Articulation Agreement between the community colleges and the university system. Those are all part of CCP and get college weighting. There are hundreds. And then there are local courses that a said district may work with a local school district. A local school district and a local college may determine. Those receive high school credit, not necessarily towards a specific graduation requirement other than electives. So going back to the first pot, which are a subset of the courses on the CAA for the graduation requirements. So when we do AP and IB courses, we do review all of the course materials. So like soon, in a little bit, I'll be coming back to you about one of them. Our content team looks at the content and all of the standards and all of the curricular resources that are given, and we say, does this, for the most part, cover? It's not going to be exactly one-to-one, but for the most part, does this cover this? Which is what we did for the item that's coming to you in SLA. For the community college courses, there is a general course description, and so we look at that, and there are no standards like we have in K-12, because just like we take college courses, it's really up to the professor after the general, or the instructor after the general course description. So we do have many courses that we have set equate, but to answer your question, no, we don't necessarily do a deep standards review that maybe I'm hearing we should try to do more.
And that includes some courses that are required for graduation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will say yes.
I would, I would say that would be something that we should look at. I don't
Be
know
happy
if my
to.
colleagues-
Donna Tipton out of statement, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Donna Tipton Rogers here. Of course, I do have quite a bit of background experience from the community college and higher education. And I will tell you that one thing it's important to remember as we are talking about CCP programs in cooperative, innovative high school, early colleges, there are rigorous courses in place at the community college that has gone through the comprehensive articulation agreements already with universities. We go through SACS accreditation. There's several different accrediting bodies at the community college level. So, no, we don't actually have the content and standards that AP courses do. However, you're talking about college classes. College classes, for the most part, that will transfer seamlessly to universities with no problem at all. So I think that when we're talking about maybe trying to prescribe something to our community colleges, that's something that we do not need to probably get involved in, because we're talking about institutions that have their own credentials and qualifications that are in place. I think that the proof of success from our CCP is showing, and I think that we're all working very hard to make sure that we offer the best, best instruction that we can to students across the state from all the community colleges. And then back to a statement that was made about transportation and different things that high schools and LEAs put in place to teach the CCP classes. A lot of those classes are also online, and they're actually being held online, but most LEAs have instructors where the students actually go to a certain classroom, they attend, and community colleges have liaisons that get back and forth between the two. So, again, if you have any questions about some of the community college side of it, and what we do with our high school partners, I'm happy to provide any information there.
And that was a group of classes. Thank you so much for highlighting that second group that's all on the CAA. That's that list that is they agree upon by the transfer committee. There's a transfer committee between the community college and UNC system.
That's right. There's several of our colleges right now that automatically have entry into several universities once they actually start at a community college as well. It's called immediate access entry. And that just goes to show the great partnership that's going on between the community colleges and the universities as well.
Thank you, Dr. Tipton Rogers. It's really great that you're on the phone with us today on this topic. I appreciate that. Anyone else? I think we have a little time issue here, so if there are no more questions, that completes the committee. Yes.
If I could just, I could speak to this really quickly, but just in my experience, this past year when I was signing up for classes, I was given the choice to take AP Statistics at my high school or Math 152, I believe it's called Statistical Methods, at my local community college. And I asked my guidance counselor, like, what's the difference between these two? Why are they the same class? Like, what should I do? And she said, basically, if you're taking AP Statistics, you could get an A in the class, a 96, let's say, a pretty high A, should transfer to college. But the AP Statistics exam that you have to take for your AP course is a lot harder than some of the other things that can happen in community courses. And so that's why a lot of times people don't get credit in college. So I chose the Math 152 Statistical Methods because I could get a C or above in the CCP and then transfer that. So obviously I know I'm not going to make a C in that class, but I know that if I make an A.
I love her confidence.
But I could do just as well in the other class that has the same standards, and then I will get credit for it in college.
And I could speak to that as a parent as well of a son that went through CCP and AP courses. The AP courses, even if you do get credit, might get credit for an elective, even if it's a specific course. And it may have changed over the last 2-3 years. But the CCP courses, the thing that most of our students liked about it. And we partnered even, this is one of my cooperative innovative high schools that our students went to. It was guaranteed credit course per course. If you took a biology course, you got biology credit. So that, I know those rules are changing. That's it historically, so that's important to know.
Thank you all so much. We really do have a little time push here, and so if we need to, if we'll come back through this tomorrow, perhaps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for our visitor. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ms. Kamitz and Ms. White. We'll now turn to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee and the Chair, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Student Learning and Achievement Committee. Dr. Olivia Oxendine is the Vice Chair of this committee, and we've got a full agenda, but we will move through it expeditiously. We're going to start with our first action on first reading item, which is going to be a report to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee. You'll remember there was a bill that asked us to take a look at how we could look at school performance scores, especially in terms of growth and achievement, and provide some recommendations about how we look at that. This board asked SREB to come in and support us not only in looking at that question, which we have a required report for, but also in taking a look at some questions, excuse me, which had come up about retest scores counting in not just achievement but growth, about the alignment of our accountability system to our strategic plan, this board's strategic plan, and also the alignment of our accountability system to the definition of a sound-based education in the Leandro Supreme Court decision. And with that full plate, SRB has come in, done some work with a working group that we put together, an accountability working group, to begin to answer these questions. A quick word of status and how I want you to think about this report. There was a meeting last week. We've done this in a pretty tight timeline. A robust meeting. Some of the folks at the table were there. I think a lot of important feedback at that meeting to SREB and the working group. So it is SREB's work right now to move through all that to give us a set of options that we want to consider to make recommendations to the General Assembly. Today is about getting your feedback and reactions and thoughts on the work thus far. You'll see a little bit about the working group's thoughts. Coming out of this, at the deadline on February 15th, we will submit, per the legislative deadline, a first report about the input we've received and the kind of information we're looking at. We will then come back and submit a second report that has the specific recommendations, which we will work on not only as a board in response to SREB's recommendations, but also in consultation with the state superintendent and his team, so that we are speaking with one voice on this issue of the accountability system. So that's the process moving forward. So what we will vote on tomorrow is essentially we'll send a report with a lot of this data to show where we are in process as a first report, and then come in with a second report. So, Mr. Chairman, any questions before great. So let me introduce Dr. Dale Winkler, Dr. Ivy Alford from SREB. We appreciate your partnership on this very important issue and set of issues for us in the state of North Carolina, and appreciate you taking some time to be here from Atlanta and giving us an update on the progress of the working group.
Well, you're very welcome. We appreciate the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. And I'd just like to also echo that one of our consultants on this project was Dr. Terry Holliday, that many of you are probably familiar with. And so we've been pleased to work with him on this. For those of you who might not be familiar, I'll be very quick about SREB, the Southern Regional Education Board. We were founded in 1948 as America's first interstate compact by Southern governors and legislators, with the focus on improving post-secondary education across the South. But over the years, we have grown into doing more work in the K-12 arena, and now that's where the majority of our work lies, is doing school improvement work across the South. This slide that you see here just quickly describes the type of work that we do. We analyze and publish data and research around education and workforce development issues. We convene and engage numerous shareholders across the region, and then we support action. We go in and help states, schools, and districts implement action plans that bring about improvement. In November of 2019, we signed an agreement with this board to conduct a study of the state's accountability model. And we were asked specifically to address the four following things: recommendations on possible changes to the weighting measures of the overall school performance and reporting methods, feasibility of including end of grade and end of course retest scores in the achievement and growth calculations, alignment among the state accountability system and the board strategic plan, and alignment of the state's accountability system and report card with Leandro court ruling as it relates to sound and basic education. To fulfill this requirement, SREB, we have reviewed accountability models of all 50 states, and we have facilitated the meeting of the North Carolina State Accountability Work Group. And as Mr. Buxton said, this work group met last Friday, January 31st, and today we're going to share the results of that working group meeting. The overarching challenge that will need to be addressed is the alignment of all the reporting systems. Included on this slide, you'll see many of them, to the state's vision and its goals. Where do you want to go? A lack of alignment has been identified, for example, between the reporting and your ESSA state plan, and we ask you to keep the alignment in mind as I go through these findings in the report this afternoon. In the packet that we've provided you, you'll find a document, and in that document, it looks like this. On pages 6 and 7, it identifies the 3 federal acts of the Every Student Succeeds Act, Perkins 5, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, and also My Future NC goals. I encourage you at a later time to look at this and identify the similarities and the differences among the goals across the 3 federal acts and the state plan. It's critical that the state determine its vision and its related goals for graduates of North Carolina's public school system. The state's many shareholders need to come to a consensus on a vision and goals that reflect in the objectives, the strategies, and the measures identified in each of these federal acts. So when you're determining a vision and goals, shareholders should consider the following questions. What are the attributes and abilities you want from a graduate of North Carolina schools? What are your goals in terms of transition readiness at each grade level? What contributes to a positive school culture focused on continuous improvement? And how will the state address gaps in student access and achievement? To begin the discussion on the vision and the goals, the individuals and groups listed on this slide participated in the accounting work group meeting last Friday. These individuals represent teachers, principals, superintendents, higher education, community leaders, individuals from the Department for Public Instruction, and the governor's office. This is the agenda that we used last Friday as we met with the working group. They were led through 4 discussion areas, and these areas of discussion were developed from the components of the agreement between SREB and the board and what needed to be addressed in this report. During each of these discussion topics, SREB presented a brief overview of data and current policy and/or practice and shared samples from other states, and then gathered feedback by asking questions. So let's get started by looking at that first component, weighting and reporting. In your packet on pages 9 and 10, you'll find a table that displays the weight assigned to student achievement by every state in the nation. Take just a moment and review the assignment of weight to achievement in the states. What trends do you see? How does North Carolina compare to other states? Again, that's on pages 9 and 10. You'll notice that North Carolina and Vermont have the highest weighting for student achievement. A majority of states weight academic achievement around 40% of a school's overall performance rating. Most of the states do have more than 2 measures for determining performance rating. ESSA requires student achievement to be the larger weight of all measures, but it does allow states to determine the measures that make up the school performance rating. You'll also find in that packet on pages 11 and 12 a list of rating types by each state. You'll see that on the left-hand side of this slide, we've given you a breakdown of the rating types. 12 states use A through F grades. but the grade ratings are not comparable across states because of the different measures, weights, and scales used to determine the grade. Some states use an index, others use a descriptive format, and some use stars instead of letter grades. So the working group reviewed this data, and we've summarized their feedback here on this slide. They were concerned about the use of the AF designations, especially in labeling schools as failing, preferred a stars or dashboard visual to communicate current standing, and requested the addition of a descriptive component to communicate school context in the use of innovative practices. And that comment around the ability to discuss innovation in a school came up more than one time during the discussion. The work group reviewed sample report cards from Ohio. There are a few things you should know about Ohio's accountability model as you look at its report card. The data found on the report card aligns extremely well with the state's ESSA plan. There is an overall school performance grade, but the report card provides 6 sub-score areas. Reviewers of the report card can find additional information by clicking on each sub-score area. So if you look at this example here, the screenshot that we have of the school report card is also on page 13 in your packet that we've provided. You'll find an overall school performance grade at the top, followed by grades for each of the subgrades. The subgrades are achievement, progress, gap closing, graduation rate, improving at risk, K-3 readers, and prepared for success. On the left side of this slide are the components of Ohio's ESSA state plan. On the right side are the categories for the Ohio report card. There's little to no confusion between the goals set forth in the state plan and the reporting to the community of shareholders. As I stated, if you want additional information, an individual can click on each one of the subgrades and can find it. You'll see here additional information provided, for example, on achievement, for those who want to dig a little deeper. And here's another slide that kind of gives you just an overview of what they use in Ohio. It provides graphs and charts for those who prefer this type of format of data. But after reviewing the sample report card, the work group members provided us the following feedback. When comparing the Ohio model to North Carolina, one educator stated, "School performance grades do not provide parents and other stakeholders adequate transparency because scores are not itemized on the report cards to reveal how letter grades are calculated. As a result, school performance grades are overly simplistic and do not capture the nuances of the school's strengths and weaknesses. The growth score is a better indicator of how educators in the school are impacting children." And another member stated, "By combining student achievement measures with student growth, we mask the fact that students in those schools are exceeding expected growth. There will always be information that is hidden by combining these very distinct measures." The second item of discussion centered around retest data. And we asked them the following questions. The desire during the discussion was to gather any information on the limitations of retesting. So we asked them to discuss 3 items: the current system, such as timeline, supports provided to students, and the benefits of retesting data. The current testing window is too short to provide support to students during the school year. The current limitations cause districts to provide support to students within a 2-week window of 10 days between identification of not meeting proficiency and retesting. There was a discussion around the clarification of the intention of retesting. One purpose could be to more accurately measure what students learned in the academic year. The second would be determine the success of intervention and the remediation that was provided. So why are retests important? In some states or districts, retests are important because of high stakes associated with the assessment. For example, there are some places where a student must meet proficiency on an end-of-grade, end-of-course assessment in order to graduate from high school. Or a student in the lower grades must meet proficiency in order to avoid retention. The research, though, clearly shows that retests have little impact on overall achievement scores. Members of the working group indicated that the results do not impact more than 3% in growth in North Carolina. Thus, the recommendation for the group was to not make any revisions to the current policy at this time on retests. Alignment to the strategic plan. This was the third topic of discussion. The group reviewed each of your 3 goals that you have set and the objectives set forth in your strategic plan. And we divided the group into 3 teams and asked them to review one of the 3 goals within the strategic state plan. And then the team members were asked to identify the data that's related to each of those objectives. And we asked them to look at it in the lens of, should it be reported? Should it be included in the accountability score and designations? And then we asked them to priority rank those objectives. So again, they were asked to review each goal and each objective, and it was decided if an item should be included in an accountability model or just reported for the school. Here you find the items ranked in order of highest priority. The work group identified as being included in the accountability measure. So you'll see here under Goal 1, the objective related to increasing average composite score of college entrance exams should be included in accountability, as well as the objective related to increased access, readiness, and attainment of early post-secondary opportunities. In Goal 2, growth measures by subgroup should be a part of accountability, and the percent of students meeting ESSA yearly measures of interim progress. And in Goal 3, no measures were recommended as part of the overall accountability. However, when you look at those things that should be reported for each school or on display in some type of report card, under Goal 1, the percentage of 4-year-olds in pre-K, suspensions and expulsions, measures to communicate school climate, and the number of educators of color. 2, science proficiency, summary of students' access to technology and financial data, and then in Goal 3, measures to communicate advanced teaching roles and measures to communicate continued learning for educators. The work group then reviewed recommendations related to accountability found in the West Ed report, and we looked just at that section on accountability. The work group members were asked to identify recommendations that we had already discussed in the first 3 topics, and they were asked to identify any missing data points. In this discussion, we did share some measures from 3 states to set context for this type of data that we might want to look at, and we provided examples from states measuring K-3 readiness, college and career readiness, and gap closure. We looked at some data from Ohio, Florida, and Kentucky. I'll just quickly show you some of the slides that we shared with them. For example, this is one of the measures around K-3 in Ohio. Another display of that. We looked at preparedness for success in Ohio, a college and career readiness measure, and some descriptors there, and how it's displayed. We looked at Kentucky's measures around career readiness as a component of the college and career readiness measure. And we also looked at student growth models in Florida, were given as examples. After reviewing this data and the recommendations within the West Ed report, the group provided the following feedback. And I want you to look at this, what's on the slide. Use of the existing kindergarten readiness assessment and related assessment to show growth to 3rd grade. Identify measures of college and career readiness. They like some of those that were identified from Kentucky. Determine how much growth has been achieved by the lowest quintile of students from the Florida example. Include EL indicator in places other than accountability, and allow schools to include qualitative descriptors to express progress in the use of innovative programs. And you'll see that again, comment around being able to talk about the innovation taking place in the school. So overall feedback, reporting multiple measures separately would allow schools to identify progress and prioritize next steps. And you see here labeling schools as failing does not communicate the context of the school or the progress made for the students. The work group expressed, though, there is an urgent need to address the current weighting of just 2 measures for achievement and growth. So when making decisions about revising the current weighting and reporting of school performance, you need to keep the following in mind. That's the timeline for revision of goals, short-term changes which support schools to monitor both achievement and growth, such as having a separate score for both and presenting both growth and achievement. And collaboration with stakeholders will be very essential to this process. So again, SRAB would like to recommend the state come to some consensus on its vision of goals. Once the vision and common goals are established, it's recommended that multiple measures for achievement, such as student achievement, growth, K-3 readiness, gap closing, college and career readiness, and school quality be considered for the overall school performance rating, and then you can determine an appropriate weighting for each of those measures. So that's a very quick overview of the work done at this point. You have a brief narrative of the findings on pages 2 through 5 of your packet. We're going to prepare a more comprehensive written report that will be submitted to you in 1 week from today. And at that time, then we can make revisions or whatever you need for us to do at that point. We just like now to offer an opportunity for you to ask questions and provide feedback into the reporting process.
So board members, again, and thank you, Dr. Winkler, Dr. Alford, understanding that in a week's time, we'll get a more formal document with recommendations that will be incorporated in the report we make to the General Assembly. This would be an important time for SRAB to hear additional feedback from the board about questions, reactions, and thoughts. So let me open the floor,
Got a question.
please.
Mr. Buxton, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Winkler, great report. It's big. But I'd like to ask you one question. On your accountability and work participants, I didn't see nothing in there about the boards of education. Is it not part of that?
Restate that again. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I'm asking.
You've got your group participants and your accountability work groups.
Oh,
You've got districts, and you got including teacher, principal, and superintendent representatives, but nothing about the local boards.
yes, we did have a local board member there. Actually, one sitting right here that was a part of the. I apologize. There was a local board member.
But it's not,
Right,
am I right?
yeah, you're right, it's not there, but we did
Okay.
invite.
Yes, we did invite. I apologize. We did have a local board member.
Important point.
But I don't think that prohibits us from continuing to take input from local board members
Correct.
in this exercise.
Thank you. Ms. Morris?
I appreciate the report. I worked alongside with Matt. I wasn't able to attend, but Cesar Campana attended in my absence. And this was something that Matt and I were very interested in digging into. And we formed a group of teacher leaders from across the state where we did some deep dives into different reports in order to prepare for our work group participation. And this group of teachers spans the whole state. And we came to a couple of recommendations that I just want to share with the board right now. The first, before I get into the two recommendations, we just want to say that we strive so hard to have policies that do no harm. But the current school improvement and this current school report card grades, unfortunately, is doing harm to our schools by encouraging high poverty populations to exist in schools at unfair rates. We find that by looking at achievement as a higher than the growth percentage at 80%, we know that the achievement positively correlates with economic status. And so when families move into areas and they see schools of the D or an F and then school choices options exist, a lot of families choose to go the route of the other choices, be it magnets or charters, and then that allows schools to have a snowballing effect where this policy is supporting a high population of poverty to exist in one school. And so we really want to find ways to look at school report card grades where we are doing no harm in our policy. And so 2 of the short-term fixes that we really believe in strongly as a group of teachers is to separate growth and proficiency into 2 separate scores. By separating them, we'll have more transparency of the data so that we understand why a school might not be doing as well based on proficiency, which is tightly correlated to economic status. But parents might feel more comfortable sending their students to a school that is doing really well with growth. The second thing is we are not a fan of the A through F letter name, the nomenclature, and that would be an easy fix. We would suggest aligning it with the EOG, EOC achievement scores of a 1 through 5. That takes the stigma away from a school having an F or a failing grade, and it also aligns with the Pepsi recommendation to score EPPs based on number scores instead of letter grades. And so those 2 recommendations are what we found out with our deep dive of teachers across the state.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Thanks for taking the time to get that level of feedback for us. Appreciate it. Other comments, questions? Mr. McKinney?
So I love having the Ohio example, and I was wondering to align a little bit with what we've been discussing with our strategic plan. Are there any models that also include child nutrition and breakfast gaps and how that's part of? I saw that one of the recommended was measures to communicate school climate. So, and I saw the restorative justice piece with the suspensions and expulsions, and I was wondering if there might be any models you could share that also discuss breakfast gap, and then also, and maybe in a non-measuring stance, but show data where the number of students to support staff. So that could be a piece of data that might not be included in the school card, but also it would give the ability to see how much support staff was included to whether or not that had a profound effect on where the school might be graded.
Your first question around the breakfast, I do not recall that in the ones that I have reviewed, but I can double check that with our research associates to see if they're aware of it. But I do not recall it being included in an actual measure of points. I know it's not, I think, across our 16 southern states. But we'll make sure we check on that for the full report.
Thank you.
Are there, I'm sorry, follow up?
Yeah, please.
Are there any that report out number of support staff to students?
Yes, you will find that on some report cards,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Bristow-Smith.
So one of the things I think is exciting is that technology allows us to provide tools that, when reported to the public, can be accessible at multiple different levels. So you can have the bird's eye view of a certain metric, but then you can also drill down. And I think that would move us forward if we have multiple measures that allow us to tell our story, both at a general level, but also for those folks who are interested, can allow them to dig down deeply and see subgroup data and to disaggregate that. So I'm hoping that whatever model we come up with will have some robust tools. We've seen that in other areas like the Panorama Social Emotional Learning Survey, which provides schools tons of resources for how to use the data and not just report it. I want to, though, echo that in our current model that we're using now, schools across the state do not feel like their story is being told. In my own district, Tier 1 county, we have 5 schools that would have A's for growth, but can't get their head above a C because the way our current model is structured. So to me, that provides some urgency to this work, and it certainly, I think, validates that the time is right for something transformative. In particular, the teacher working group that Mariah and I worked with had real trouble with the idea that we ever apply an F rating to a school, because if a school has gotten to a point where they have an F rating, we have failed that school. That school, I'm sure, is working in due diligence and in good faith to try to serve their students. But we as a state have failed that school if they are earning an F. We haven't provided enough resources. We haven't had equitable funding to recruit high-quality teachers to that school. Our ADM model for funding doesn't serve the needs of those schools, and we know that schools don't have the same needs, and yet we continue to apply equal measures to them. So as I know, we're working on a longer timeline that aligns with the federal timeline as well, and so I'm clear that sometimes I want things to happen more quickly than they are going to. I do want to emphasize that at some point We have to be able to tell the story of schools that are working against all odds to do amazing work and to elevate the metrics that we use to tell that story. In my own county, I have one of the top 5% growth schools in the entire state, Carver Elementary School, and yet they don't get an A for growth. I mean, they don't get that metric on their school report card, and they're in the top 5% in the entire state. So there's a need for us to make sure that whatever metrics we ultimately come up with, there are some qualitative opportunities for schools to tell their own story, and then also the data metrics allow us to report on schools that are just doing transformative, amazing work despite socioeconomics, despite other issues.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace.
I hate going last because it means I have to be expedient in my response, Mr. Buxton. But I do want to say one thing I wish you would add to the report, as was mentioned, I think on slide 39, where a big barrier was the access to the internet for low socioeconomic schools. I would say please add for rural areas just access to the internet. I mean, we're still on dial-up in some places, and mainly in my region and the region that I serve in Western Craven County. So that's one thing that we don't want to miss out on if we're going to be suggesting improvements. Also, please look at the school report card, what's reported in Math 3, that's on the report card, and what actually goes into the accountability model, which is only the students that took Math 1 in middle school. That is a big dichotomy that we're fighting at the school to try to get to our stakeholders. That leads me to the piece where, the descriptive piece that has been much stated by my colleagues. There is a big need for that section on the report card so schools can tell their story. As stated before, a grade doesn't define a school. The school's culture and the educational experience that each student goes through defines a school. I mean, you can go into a school right in my own area. We have a private school that you can go there because it looks good on paper, but you're not, if you don't eclipse a socioeconomic level, you begin to get picked on. Okay, and so then they come back to public schools and they come to us. So those are the kind of things, those external type of intricacies that we wish you would look at when you go back through this and you finalize your product. Last but not least, retest. I know y'all said y'all didn't want to touch retest, but as a high school principal, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you we have some serious strategic scheduling going on due to retest because retest is not offered in the fall semester. So you always, I hate to say it, but you want to put your honors or your kids that can handle it first semester so you have that time, second semester, to get them through the retest. If not, you have students coming in twice a month trying to keep the knowledge in the forefront to be able to do well on the retest. And retest can be the difference between a C, a B, D to the C, type of school. And also can be the difference in actually students going on to be successful later on in life.
Thank you. Board members, let me suggest, if it works with you, we've gotten, I think, really important feedback from our advisors, starting Mr. Herring all the way around. We're going to have another report come to us that we're going to have to make some decisions on, final recommendations that we send. I feel like this is more feedback to SREB. SREB will come back to us. So unless there are pointed questions or comments you'd like to make to inform this next part of the process, I'm going to suggest we close this part down and remind you that not only do we have an ESSA amendment at some time, but we have a General Assembly who's asked us for our feedback and the state superintendent's feedback on accountability that will, I'm sure, play into this next legislative session. And we have a 60-day report due to the judge, which includes a required response around the accountability system that we're using. So this does have urgency to it, Mr. Bristow-Smith, beyond the federal. With that, I want to thank SREB for the role you've played and you're going to continue to play for us moving forward, and thanks to the support you provide the states.
You're welcome.
Southeast.
Continue working with you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move to SLA 2 and the beginning of our fairly extensive discussion section today. This is on our kindergarten entry assessment, and last month, we heard an update and a new business item about the kindergarten entry assessment and some changes and the kind of rationale behind the work going on. Today, we have the first step in a policy amendment where we'll discuss potential policy amendment to the KEA and the KEA interpretation panel. So at this point,
I'm up.
You're up.
Okay, so good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, members of the board, colleagues, and stakeholders. I'm Amy Ryan, the Director of the Office of Early Learning. I'm here today to represent our division as we continue the discussion about the improvements for the kindergarten entry assessment with a request to consider amendments to State Board Policy KNEC 017. Amending this policy will remove language that is no longer relevant and supports the use of the North Carolina Early Learning Inventory. During the January State Board meeting, the Division of Early Learning presented the rationale for updating and improving the current kindergarten entry assessment. These improvements will strengthen the alignment with the General Statute 115C 83.5 while addressing the recommendations based on stakeholder feedback, including better functionality and additional tools for teachers and administrators. While we gathered input from stakeholders previously, we've also taken the last month to have discussions at our regional meetings where all but 8 districts were represented, and we followed up with them, and we've had nothing but positive feedback about the assessment itself and the updates. They are pleased with that because we've listened to the input they gave us, as well as the name change and what makes better sense. So furthermore, the proposed policy amendment will support Leandro's recently released West Ed report, the recommendations for the improvements for the support of early grade success by increasing seamless practices, assessments, and ongoing data collection between pre-K and kindergarten in an effort to ensure each child is afforded the opportunity to receive a sound basic education. Changing the title to North Carolina Learning Inventory will also reflect the desired updates and improvements to the current assessment. The name Early Learning better represents the alignment and support of the transition between pre-K to kindergarten using a broader range of skills from birth to grade 3. Changing the word assessment to inventory better represents the intention of its use, documenting students' learning and development to support ongoing individualized instruction. Current updates being made actually are out-of-the-box customized content from Teaching Strategies Gold, the same platform we're currently using with additional features which will address and provide developmental ranges of skills on each progression. Since the ranges are already established, the current KEA interpretation panel language will now need to reflect a new purpose. The North Carolina Early Inventory is an observation-based formative assessment that includes a set of developmental progressions across the 5 domains. Teachers will document students' learning and development with evidence to substantiate a child's skill attainment within each of the areas to inform and respond to the instructional needs of his or her students. And these 5 are listed on the slide for you. The amended language will ensure that the teachers will observe, collect documentation, and make preliminary ratings throughout the first 60 days for the required progressions. Within those progressions, we have identified a subset of early language, literacy, and math skills to be addressed per our policy within those first 30 school days. These preliminary ratings are to be built upon with additional observation, documentation, and personalized learning for the remainder of those 60 days. This is the policy. In 2012, the intent of the original policy was to create an interpretation panel whose role was to review the North Carolina learning progressions and recommend developmental ranges of skills. These developmental ranges were to be used, let me go back one here, actually to be used for KEA data, reporting that data. Teaching Strategies Gold has developed widely held expectations and represents ranges of skills along each of those progressions that are visible to teachers and administrators. Therefore, the original role of the interpretation panel has changed. We would like to amend the interpretation panel. Head back right here. Sorry, I'm not matching my slides that you have on my hope. So we'd like to amend the interpretation panel language to reflect a new purpose. We'll convene a diverse stakeholder group in the winter of 2021 to assist in identifying the data fields that will be used to populate the state's longitudinal data. And the inclusion of this panel's work will reinforce the intended purpose of the developmental screening and the kindergarten entry assessment while further ensuring alignment to North Carolina's early learning and development standards, as well as the standard course of study. Most importantly, with continued use of the North Carolina Early Learning Inventory, teachers will be better equipped and informed to support the learning, development, and growth of each kindergarten student throughout the year as we shift the focus away from our an entry assessment to focus more on an inventory that is ongoing for all children. At this time, I'll take questions.
Questions about this policy amendment on the entry assessment and the interpretation panel? Ms. Morris, anything you want to add on this?
Surprisingly, no.
Yay.
All right.
Excellent job.
Thanks, team.
Hearing none.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, SLA 3 is a policy amendment related to English language learners' academic achievement levels. You may remember English language learners take the WIDA test, and this will affirm our adoption of certain achievement standards.
Yes,
Things required by federal law.
excellent introduction, thank you. So yes, as part of our U.S. Department of Education peer review process, we have to submit all the evidence related to our assessments. We recently have done this for our English Learners Proficiency Assessment, which is WIDA, and it was noted that we had never officially come to the board and had the board adopt the performance definitions. So the performance definitions are just as with the general assessments, where we have academic achievement levels, and then we have descriptors of those academic achievement levels. So this is the same thing, but it relates to the English Proficiency Assessment, which is WIDA. We've amended this policy. So it's really putting in place officially something that has been in place with the WIDA assessment, has been being assessed really in North Carolina since about 2006, 2007. This addition of the assessment since about 2015. So we were correcting something that we need to correct. There are other technical corrections in here, just to briefly note. One is to accurately state the name of the assessment. It was changed, so we changed that as well. And then also, in full disclosure, previously, we have allowed school districts to administer the screener for determining if a child is an English learner within the first 14 days of school, and then once school gets going within the first 30 days. And we're recommending to combine that and just have it be the first 30 days for consistency. So, thank you.
Dr. Howard, that makes those technical corrections. It includes policy which essentially reflects current practice.
Yes, absolutely.
And also sets the standard level. So the levels are in the policy.
Exactly. The levels are in the policy, and a link to the descriptors are in the policy as well.
Right.
Yes.
Board members' questions. This is an item for discussion this month, action next. Any questions? Hearing none?
Thank you.
Move on. Thank you, Dr. Howard. SLA 4, which is our Ed Oversight Report on Read to Achieve. You may remember, we do on an annual basis and gives us data. Dr. Galloway?
Good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to share the Read to Achieve data state level summary. I will highlight some pieces of the summary. You should have in front of you at some point the report and then the slides as well, because I will refer to both. So the report shares data for the following items that are listed here that are required by general statute, which are outlined in the beginning of the report as well. I've included some tables and graphs to take a deeper dive into some pieces of this report. The first two, we will take a little bit of a deeper dive into. The next one, the reading interventions, were reported by districts, and they are in your report. If you have any questions about any of those, it's a table that demonstrates what the districts reported that they're using as reading interventions. And we as a team are taking a deep dive into that, and will hopefully use some of the recommendations of the task force that the state board put together, hopefully to be able to provide some feedback for districts in using appropriate interventions, making sure that they are aligned with the science of reading or evidence-based practices. The next bullet, the licensure area, for that piece, that section, we have preliminary data for that to indicate that approximately 60% of the teachers for Reading Camp have 10 or more years of experience, and approximately 93% of the teachers held at least one of the target licenses. We have a couple of LEAs that we're waiting for final information from, and as soon as we have that information from those LEAs, we will be able to release that table that shows the licensure area. For the next piece, the districts were asked to report, for the next two pieces, actually, we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive. So if you'll go to the next part of the report, this is a screenshot of one of the pages of the report that actually Tammy has already shown in one of her reports earlier in the year, and it shows the achievement of the third grade students on the Read to Achieve, for Read to Achieve purposes. So we see on here that 57.3% of our students have demonstrated proficiency on the BOG, EOG, or the retest, which indicates that 42% still have not. And of course, that is concerning to everyone in this room. And so that is what our primary focus is right now, is to align instruction to make sure that we target the students, to make sure that we do have higher proficiency rates. One of the other parts of this report, what we did was we broke down what assessments were being used, so the alternative assessments that were being used, and you can find a report within, or the numbers within your report of all of the districts that use certain alternative assessments, and then the passing rate for those who used it for Read to Achieve, and the ones who just used it and they passed that way. So this takes a deeper dive into the data for the percentage of students who passed based on any certain pathway for proficiency. So at the bottom, you can't see it from here, but the data show that in 2019, 57.3% passed using EOG, BOG, or retest. And then as far as alternative assessments, there were 12.4% of our students who passed that pathway. And then good cause exemptions was 9.8. So you can see that the majority of the kids are passing through the EOG, BOG, or retest. However, we have a decline in alternative assessments, which is really good. I'm really excited about that. And we are looking further into which alternative assessments are effective and which ones are not, and which ones are measuring the things that we need them to measure. Also, good cause exemptions are down. So I'm excited to see the increase in the BOG, EOG, and retest. I'm really excited to see the decrease in the other. So we need to continue both of those trends in the same direction. So this is a breakdown of the BOG, EOG, and retest by subgroup. So you can see the different subgroups and how they performed for the past 6 years since Read to Achieve began. Very similar to last year, we still see the divide. We see the Asian and the white at the top, the two races in the middle, and then the American Indian, Black, and Hispanic are all right there at the very bottom. So this divide inequity, again, just like I reported last year, is a major concern. We are, within our division, really looking into reading instruction and making sure that all students are provided with effective instruction that meets those needs, because this is an equity issue. And the color of your skin should not dictate the way that you perform on an assessment, or the way that you're taught to read, or the way that you develop those reading acquisition skills. This is another chart that breaks down the BOG, EOG by the subgroups of economically disadvantaged, English learner, and then students with disabilities. So we see a decrease from last year in the students with better English language learners, I think it was. And then the next chart shows students for statewide reading camp for third grade. So 24,079 students were eligible for priority enrollment, and we do see an increase this year in students who are attending. So 48% of those students who were eligible actually did attend, and then 28% of those students were proficient after the reading camp. For first and second grade, the numbers are actually a little higher. The students who came to summer reading camp are lower, but the students who are proficient are higher. So the students who came to summer reading camp, 28% of those who were eligible actually came in second grade, and then 30% who were eligible in first grade actually came. Our target would be that all of those who are eligible would come, because that's what the camp is designed to do, is make a difference for those students. Did you upload the latest version that had the reading camp? Yeah. There are a few more slides that I added that had the reading camp. They have it in front of them. Okay. So in front of you then, you have a chart that has a tier. On there it says district support for reading camps. So on that, okay, see it now. So on there it talks about the tiers that we offer for our students. So with iStation, the beauty in iStation is that we actually can use the levels. So you can see the tiers, which the teachers are familiar with the colors, and probably everyone in the room is very familiar with the colors of the tiers. And then with iStation, it breaks down into levels as well. So the gradations of the green allow us that ability for easier identification within those levels for what our students need actually instructionally. So those gradations of green can help us to assist us with identifying the levels of support that they need. So you can see the approaching proficient level is the very light green within the level 3. Proficient is actually within level 4. So this is very different in perception for a lot of teachers because they are used to 5 years of seeing green means go, the kids are fine. This is not like that. And so for the transition, we are actually having to do a lot of training and training people's brains into thinking green does not mean go. Green means you need to still pay attention to these kids and make sure they're not falling behind. So proficiency is right there within the level 4 in the middle. So we based our cut scores for iStation on the state board approved list that has been for iStation for years now. So the cut score was 258. We kept that consistent for 3rd grade and didn't change that. And the 70th percentile is where that threshold is set. And so the levels are staying consistent. So that 70th percentile falls right there within the proficient range of between the 60th and 80th percentile. And so right there in the middle of that, level 4 is proficient on iStation measures. So what we're seeing overall across the state is an increase in the number of students who teachers are saying will be eligible through priority enrollment for summer reading camp. The good news is the fact that we can look at these levels and we can see the different levels of risk for the students, and we can base decisions on that. So currently we have guidance that says 3rd grade students have to meet a 258 at beginning, middle, and end of year to be able to be considered proficient. The guidance also translates to the middle of year. And so teachers can make decisions right now based on who is projected to be a participant in summer reading camp. And that's why we are already looking at the numbers right now. So one of the things that we can do is we can look at these gradations of the colors within the levels, and we can make some guidance that sets that priority enrollment. So legislation is clear. It says that the students who are not proficient in 3rd grade, 2nd grade, and 1st grade need to attend reading camp. So that level of proficiency can be anywhere between the 60th and 80th percentile. So what we can do within our levels, currently it's set at 70% within our guidebook, and we have set those levels and said you really need to look at these students because if they're not setting these targets, then they're not likely to meet the targets at the end of the year. So we can, if we need to, we can change some of those within that 70 to 80th percentile and still be within what is proficient considered by the law. So that would be a matter of us pushing out guidance to our districts and allowing a little bit of that flexibility. So we are looking at those options. We are welcoming any feedback that you guys have. Anybody in the room, we are welcoming feedback for that to make those decisions and make the right decision for who does need to attend reading camp. So what we need to do for sure is focus on the highest priority. So we are able to see very clearly the highest priority is those students who are in the red and yellow, which would be below the 40th percentile. And then we have the approaching proficient that is pretty much a non-negotiable. If they have not reached that proficient level by legislation, they are not considered proficient in reading. So we have set the bar a little bit high. We set it at the 70th percentile because that's what it's been for years on the state board approved list. We didn't want to change anything. We tried to keep everything as consistent as possible.
Dr.
However,
Galloway?
we do have that flexibility. Yes.
I think we're starting to move in between our different SLA items here.
Okay.
So let me come back on the report for a second and then go to this next issue of the reading camp cut scores.
Okay.
Okay.
The report, the last piece of it was the part about the summer reading camp. So
Right,
I
and we'll-
did. I sort of led into it. You're right.
Yeah,
But
let's
any
go-
questions on the report?
So let's come back to that. So let me
Perfect.
get any questions. This is for discussion this month on SLA, what are we on now, 4?
4.
On the required annual report for the data related to Read to Achieve performance. I want to make sure we cover any questions on that before we get into some of the reading camp cut scores, which is
I
our
just
next
kind of led right
conversation.
into it.
Yeah, no
Sorry
problem,
about
no
that.
problem. So any questions on the report itself? Again, it'll come back to us next month for action. You have the month to look at it. It'll be out in the field. All right, so now let's move to SLA
Perfect.
5, and we've been talking about this, and let me set this up real quick for the board.
Perfect.
That we have a guidebook which guides practice in the department's work. We're in a little bit of a interim phase, given that we have a different diagnostic, but also given kind of the legal status of where we are with the diagnostic. And so having a new guidebook is a little problematic in this point, but that doesn't change the need to have clear guidance to districts about the cut scores that we're going to use for eligibility for summer reading camps. And this is where Dr. Galloway has been going. So part of what we need to do in this process is understand, in the absence of a new approved guidebook, again, because where we are in relation to the diagnostic that we're using in the state, some clarity about what the department's guidance is going to be for districts, and an approval of essentially giving the department the authority to provide that guidance in an interim way. So let me first ask if there are any questions about what we are doing on this item, because I understand it could be confusing. Okay, seeing none, if you could just reset this notion of, and make clear, so folks are on the same page about how we're going to use the iStation 258 cut score to determine eligibility, and then what that means. And then we'll, our next item, get into the actual reading camp improvement changes.
Okay. So back step a little bit. I'm sorry I led right
All
into
right,
it.
now we're in SLA 5,
Okay,
for those
perfect.
listening at home.
Okay, perfect. So the cut score for 258 was set based on the fact that iStation and Metametrics engaged in a study in 2014, and then it was updated again in 2017. And so that study with Metametrics, they did conversion tables and set the Lexile level as comparable to our Lexile level of 725 for the EOG. So the 258 represents the same or comparable to the 725 that we expect for our third graders to read on an EOG. So that Metametrics study did that for them. So that 258 has been consistent for the past, I know, at least 4 or 5 years since it was approved on the state board list. So we used the same. We took that third grade score right off the iStation approved list. We applied it to our cut scores, and then we went backwards from there. So that was at the 70th percentile. We looked at setting the first and second lower because we saw this. We saw exactly what was going to happen because iStation does measure foundational reading skills, very much like DIBELS measures foundational reading skills. In the past, we've never used DIBELS for any of these decisions. We've always used text reading comprehension for all of these decisions. And so we had a disconnect. If we would have set first and second at 40th and kept third grade at 70th, at some point in there, you have to make up those percentiles. And so we kept everything consistent at 70th percentile. We do know that this is a high expectation, but we also know that the higher we set the expectation for students, the higher they raise the achievement level. And so we kept it the same. Now we're facing bigger numbers for eligibility for summer reading camp. We saw this coming. We knew this was coming. We're hearing it from the field now. What are we going to do? The funding will stay the same, so the numbers might be higher, but we do see that the students a lot of times don't go to summer reading camp. That's not what we want. We want the students to go to summer reading camp. So we're kind of in a decision-making here process to make some flexibility to be able to allow this decisions or what we're in is basically a transition. So we're using a new tool. The students are getting used to it. The teachers are getting used to it. And we're also applying a really stiff, hard, high expectation for these students. So in the process of them getting used to it, we're looking at trying to allow some flexibility for some decision making, but it still has to be within the law. So the law is clear. They have to be proficient to not come to summer reading camp. If they are not proficient in first, second, or third grade, they are eligible for a reading camp, for priority enrollment in reading camp. And so right now that bar is set at 70th percentile, and proficient for iStation is between 60th and 80th percentile. So we have the flexibility to go down to the 60th, but if we do, then we're making a decision to change what we have used in the past, which was approved by the state board, as the 258 cut score.
Okay,
So
so what
that's
we're
where we
doing
are.
is we're dealing with this one issue in policy in lieu of approving an entirely new guidebook. So this is the issue on the table that the department is bringing a recommendation on here for discussion this month, for action next. Let me see if there are any questions about this. Mr. Duncan?
I know there were some districts that used iStation, or at least they could have. Do we know which districts did use it? And do we know, has there been any study done about how the statistical cut score lined up with the end of grade testing?
I do
In any
know that
district that used iStation?
Mooresville Graded District used it in the past, and they said that it did align. I can find out more details of exactly if they have any data to support saying that. We do know, based on the report, that 433 students, I think it is, actually passed using, or used iStation and passed. They didn't use it for Read to Achieve purposes, but they did pass. Let me
Dr. Gallagher, is that the only
So
one you
iStation-
know of?
Mooresville Graded consistently used it, and I know a lot of districts look to them for support. See, iStation, there were 494 students who passed the alternative assessment using iStation. 91 of those students used it to meet Read to Achieve legislation. So that's part of the report that you have. Let me look and see if it's all within Mooresville Graded that was. 117 students in Pasquotank County used iStation. And 71 at Phoenix Academy. And 41 at Bradford Prep.
So, sounds
So we
like
have some
there's-
charters that were
Sounds like
using
there's some sample size between Mooresville and some of the other schools you cited. Do we know what the correlation is data-wise from what they used as a cut score for that purpose and how that correlated to actually passing the EOG test? Do we have data on that?
They would have had to use that cut score because it was consistent last year and in previous years, the 258. So they would have had to use the 258 cut score, which is comparable to the EOG based on the Metametric study. So we do know that for third grade specifically.
I think I'm not quite asking the question, right? Do we know
Okay.
how well?
Predictive.
This is gonna be my fault, not yours, so I apologize. Did that end up correlating to students who were reaching the 258 cut score? Were they in fact passing the EOG? Do we know, or was there any, if you went back and looked at it, any question about whether maybe the cut score could have looked
Right.
further revision? Because there weren't that many students using it at that point, and so Now we have a very large number of students using, so whatever correlation was there would be helpful to know. That's what I.
Right. So what we could do is those 494 students who passed it but didn't use it for Read to Achieve purposes, we could go back and see if they did or did not pass the EOG. The 91 students would have used this instead of the EOG because they didn't pass the EOG. So my accountability friends, if anybody is here.
You may not
I
be
can
able to
ask
get
them
that
if that's
data.
possible.
If you could, it
to
would
look.
be very helpful to look
Right.
at.
Yeah, that's a great question. That would show us. And iStation is gathering data this year for that study, but we don't have the data yet.
Dr. Hall, did I see a hand?
No, I was just, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I was just thinking about the 258 iStation. The 70% is
iStation.
iStation.
The 725 is EOG
It's
expectation.
725. I was just thinking.
Okay.
Thank
And the conversion table put those two together.
you. Correct.
Right.
Other questions? Ms. Morris, you know I'm looking at you. Any questions?
I think, you know, as I go around, I hear a lot of teachers want to come up and talk to me about their experiences with iStation versus M-Class. I think with any change, there's going to be a lot of just need for discussion. And I don't know the appropriate way to kind of funnel that discussion, so that's kind of a larger question for the group.
So on this one, anything about where the cut score, where the department is recommending
no,
that
I
cut
don't
score
think
be set?
so.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Really, the flexibility that we have is changing it from 70th percentile to 60th, allowing that flexibility to go down to the 60th.
Ms. White?
I think that tees me up for my comment. If we know, and I've seen this analogy
Matthew
used several
effect.
times.
Hmm.
I think it was from you, Dr. Galloway, that if the gap in kindergarten is here, that if we do not help students meet proficiency, that as children age forward, the gap only gets wider. So I can't fathom why we would even consider lowering a proficiency rating just to say that a student passed. Our standards should remain high, or else in subsequent years, we will be having the same discussion about how we close that gap. So keep the standards high, use the tools at our discretion to use that data to better intervene where those students need the most help. In no way, shape, or form should we be lowering our standards.
All right, Dr. Galloway, I think you've gotten some feedback from the board. We'll bring this back for action next month. Board members, if you would, I'd like to just segue into what was intended to be part of our monthly Read to Achieve K-3 literacy update, and just go ahead and address the reading camp issues which you have, I think, in the slides right here. I think those are the next 3 slides that we're looking at, which is the planning rubric and the partnerships and we have them. Okay, so let me remind the board that one of our 9 elements in the framework is to improve reading camps and the outcomes from those camps. And if you remember the numbers that Dr. Galloway gave, we have 48% of eligible students attending the reading camps and 28% of students achieving proficiency after the camps. So we obviously have some work to do in both convincing families they're worth going to and making sure the outcomes of those camps are what students need them to be. And so we have asked the department to look at policy changes that we ought to make and supports for districts to ensure stronger, more effective reading camps for students who are eligible to attend them. So if I want to just, since we're talking reading camps, segue into this part. We'll come back to the other part of the update.
Okay, so the tier 1, we basically have already talked about that one. So the next slide is district support for reading camps that you have in front of you.
Yeah.
So what we did to help the districts with the reading camps, last year we developed a reading camp repository. And so we went across the state and we trained the districts how to use that repository. What that repository really does is help them with planning And so now our focus is more on the instructional piece and the instructional practices that they're actually using within the camp. And so what we have done now, currently, next week it will be sent out, we developed a process to collect their plans. So not the full plan, but basically their instructional piece of the plan. And then anything else they want us to provide feedback for them. So what we're trying to do is provide support, provide any guidance that we can provide to them to be able to help make them have a successful reading camp. And we'll also spotlight those that are doing exactly what we want to see. So last year we had a conference and we spotlighted several different districts who were using the instructional practices that will actually change outcomes for students. So we had them share their reading camps, and they actually are the go-tos a lot of times now for the districts who are struggling. They will go to those people who we highlighted within that conference. Guilford, I will definitely give a shout out to them. They are doing a phenomenal job with their reading camps and their instruction overall. They're really basing a lot of their focus on building those foundational reading skills, and they're seeing a lot of progress with that. So we have also created partnerships to provide options for students. So I highlighted the Duke Endowment on the next slide, 2 slides over. That is a summer literacy program that we have been working with the Duke Endowment to accomplish. So they have 6 weeks and they have 6 hours each day. So within our legislation, we require 72 hours over 3 weeks. So it's a big shift. It's a lot more time, and they provide wraparound services as well. So we know that for a lot of students, it's very difficult to come to reading camp because the parents work, and so they have to be picked up in the middle of the day, and they don't have the transportation and things. Well, they do provide transportation, but kids going home to an empty home is a difficult situation. And so the Duke Endowment, they funded across 12 different sites. They funded 6-week program for 6 hours each day, and we saw a lot of growth within that. They have not given me the final report, but hopefully by next month I'll have that and I can share that with you in a Friday update so that you can see the data. But they provided daily breakfast, they provided lunch, they provided transportation. They engaged the families as well, which is a huge piece. So they had the families come in once a week for dinner, and then they had a parent workshop. They could not sign up their children to go to this unless they had somebody who would come to the parent workshop every week to attend that and learn instructional strategies that they could use at home. So we see that everything that works has been proven by research to work, they implemented. So they used high-quality teachers as well. So they have wonderful stories to share, and I look forward to sharing that information with you. But I wanted to highlight that because that is a spotlight, and we want to provide that flexibility. We partner with them. They use the same measures to be able to monitor the students throughout the summer reading camps, and they want to do the same again. So we had a call just the other day to try to launch it again for this year. So we're exploring possibilities for allowing some flexibility for that. And then we're developing a streamlined approach for data collection, and then looking hopefully for some possibilities in changing some of the policies to provide some ability or flexibility within the districts to use the summer reading camp to benefit the students who are eligible for reading camp all year. So instead of it just being a 3-week benefit for the students, putting in PD or curriculum materials, high-quality curriculum materials that will benefit all of the students who are identified throughout the school year. So we are going to gather the data, the plans. We'll send out the information next week. We'll give them a whole month and a half, all the way until the end of March, to submit things to us. We'll provide feedback along the way as we receive those materials. And by the end of April, we will have all feedback to all districts who submit a plan of action to us to be able to provide them feedback for. So that is our plan that's in action right now, and we're looking forward to working with districts to support them in that effort.
Great, Dr. Galloway, thank you. Board members, I want to suggest, given where we are in the hour, and some folks we're going to be honoring later this afternoon, and we still have another committee, that we table the rest of the B12 literacy update to tomorrow during the SLA section. Mr. Chairman, if this is good with you, and
Yes.
we'll pick this back up tomorrow. We may ask a few questions about reading camps tomorrow if there's some, but we'll do one more SLA 6 agenda item and then pick this up tomorrow.
I'm actually flying out to Oregon to present at the CEC conference, like about an hour from now, but I'll be happy to call in or whatever I need to do. Or Angie can, Dr. Molinax can handle all the questions.
Thanks for the flexibility.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It was Olivia and Amy's fault. Their sessions went so long. All right, SLA 6 is our last SLA item, which is revisions to our advanced courses satisfying graduation requirements. Because of the approval we had last month of the high school social studies courses, we've got some work to do with our graduation high school requirements. We've got some work to do putting this work into policy. Correct?
I think so.
Okay.
This is Grad 08, which relates to Grad 04, the graduation requirements. This
With
is
our IB.
Yes, IB. Okay, are we on this? We
Thank
good?
you. Yep.
Okay. It's like, oh, okay. So Grad 08, we're just updating that. IB came out with a new course that they have not had before last year. We had waited until our new standards. All of the IB high schools would love for you to be okay with this course satisfying our world history graduation requirements. We have had our curriculum and instruction world history staff look at that, knowing that the world history standards are not dramatically changing, very close alignment with both standards.
So board members, you see the changes on the bottom of, I think it's, I don't have the page number here.
Yeah, and the changes, I just cleaned it up, because social studies tends to have a lot of changes. I cleaned it up, but the only content change is the IB history SL course.
That one that's bolded for you. So questions for Dr. Shaw-Coltrane? Well done.
Thank you.
Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, that's the SLA agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. We'll now proceed to the last committee of the day, Business Operations, and I'll turn to the committee chair, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. We have several items today. And here on behalf of the Business Op Committee, my name is Alan Duncan, and along with Todd Chastain, we lead this committee effort. Biz Op 1 is approval of contracts over $1 million, and we will consider that in closed session, that item. So let's go on to Biz Op 2. Biz Op 2 is hurricane relief, immediate aid to restart school operations. Alexis Shaw. Alexis is here to provide us directions on this issue.
You do not want me to do that. That's not a gift I have. So, yes, BSOP 2, we're requesting this be action on first read to get the funding out to the school districts as soon as possible. This item is to modify the allotment policy manual for a new federal grant that we've received. It's called the Immediate Aid to Restart School Operations Grant Program. And the grant provides funding for 5 LEAs that were included in the state's application. And these LEAs incurred significant damages to their school buildings and operations during September 2019, which was Hurricane Dorian, either through floods or tornadoes. The total amount of the award is approximately $3.4 million, and Hyde County is the recipient of the greatest share of $2.3 million. And if you recall, you saw the devastation when the superintendent presented to you. The funds are may be used for costs associated with restarting, reopening schools, and re-enrolling students. It's quite broad in its scope. However, it may not be used for any construction or major renovations. And the LEAs may use it to reimburse themselves from eligible expenditures that they've already incurred, but they cannot double dip with insurance and other FEMA type reimbursements. You'll find the full policy in your materials, and that is what we are recommending for the board to approve. And as soon as it is approved, then we will get those funds out to those 5 school districts as soon as we can.
This is on first read for action because obviously we're very pleased to have gotten 75% of the funds that were requested by the districts. And we're anxious to get those funds directly to the districts as they're already putting a lot of work into restoring the facility. So are there any questions on this item? All right, thank you very
Thank you.
much. That brings us to Biz Op 3, which is again is an action item for first read. Update to hurricane relief, hold harmless transportation. And we now move back a year in hurricanes from Dorian to Florence and others. So
certainly, good afternoon.
welcome,
Kevin Harrison.
Kevin. Yes.
Section Chief for School Transportation. So the transportation funding is based on prior year expenditures and prior year operational data. And because transportation funding for this year will be based on 18-19 data, we do have to go back a year with hurricanes. And remember when Florence came through eastern North Carolina and south central North Carolina as well, and really disrupted things in that area in a way we had not seen in a very, very long time, in the modern era, really. And there were many days of school forgiven and never attended by students, and there were students displaced, students that had to be, I mean, literally, the effort put in by the local school districts to even find children and return them to their original schools was massive, and they deserve all kinds of recognition for just that level of effort that they completed. But because transportation funding is based on the data from 18-19, we tried our best to limit its impact on 18-19. But for the districts that are in the that were in these most significantly impacted areas, which are the presidentially declared disaster area, where families could receive individual assistance for the destruction that occurred, we believe that it is better to be safe than sorry and to not take any chances with harming them by using that 18-19 information. So what we are suggesting is to utilize or what we're recommending actually, is to utilize for counties that benefit from it, the funding rating that is based only on their 17-18 data. So there are normally two ratings, one based on the 17-18 model with 18-19 data, and one with 18-19 data from all the districts. We're suggesting also that we now provide where it would be beneficial to those 34 counties, 37 school districts, that we allow them to use the rating that only uses 17-18 data. That would effectively help 17 of the 37 LEAs in the area, and it would result in about $2 million worth of additional funding to those districts in total, and it would be within currently available funds.
All right, so as you can see, this is an effort to finally be able to take that backwards look that we all knew a lot of problems were being created on the transportation side when you couldn't even access certain parts of the county, which caused a lot of roundabout routes. So now this is the department's effort to go back and do a look back in order to try to create as good a fairness as is possible under all the circumstances to try to look forward and not have a penalty that not only went the hurricane year, but would then leave its imprint on future years potentially. So again, this is an item I think would be welcome in a number of districts to try to find a way to be as fair as we possibly can be in these allocations. I appreciate the work that's gone into looking at this problem and figuring out how to best try to address it as it's been raised by a number of districts. Are there questions or comments on this? This will be an action item. All right, not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you.
All right, we have some great momentum going, but we may slow down for a moment. Biz Op 4, which is an action item in which we've talked about for at least the last couple of meetings, relates to State Board of Education prioritized budget requests. Now, in our previous two meetings, we've spent a good bit of time talking about priorities from the standpoint of board members as we've looked through a number of things. Specifically, our strategic plan has been a real touch point for how we look at things that we need to do as we move forward. We've also taken a look at other issues that have been important and have been raised and lifted up as things that need to be looked at, including, for example, the support services issue that's continues to be an area where we fall quite far behind nationally in supporting our students, the student support efforts that are out there. And then since our last meeting in February, of course, there have been a number of developments. The West Ed report has been out in public now for a period of time. There was a hearing in the Leandro case before Judge Lee on February, I believe it was the 20th. I may not be right about that. So it's a recent hearing there. And so we now have a number of, yes, it was, excuse me, January 20th. I'm jumping ahead to February. But a number of items were obviously discussed there, and a number of priorities were discussed, and a consent order was signed in which the judge set out the 7 pillars of area that we need to focus on in order to accomplish the Leandro goals over a period of time. And the status of that case has been well documented in the press, but just briefly is that the parties have 60 days to report, and actually got a few bonus days, but 60 days to report to the judge as of March the 30th with a short-term plan or some things what can be accomplished in the short term that has been defined as something that can be done like in the upcoming year. There then is follow-up 6 months later for midterm goals, and then 9 months later for long-term goals, and how to meet those, and a plan being requested, and the judge is consistent with the effort that went into the consent order. The judge is requesting the parties to continue to work together and try to come forward with a unified request and plan in terms of where we proceed. Obviously, there are critical partners in this process. If you just think about some of the Leandro pillars, early childhood, for example, is one. DHHS is critical to that discussion and critical to the effort that will be undertaken there. Our community colleges and our university system are critical to a number of these initiatives. We've talked about them again today with our EPP discussion, and honestly talk about that almost every meeting at this point. Our community colleges have been prominent already in our meeting today, including the discussion about our early colleges and how important they are to the progress of that process. So we have a number of partners, and the community colleges, as Dr. Tipton Rogers has pointed out earlier, are now starting to provide a much more significant role as we go forward to education preparation, as we look at how that dynamic is going to proceed. So another very important partner. There are a lot of partners to pull together here from a lot of different areas that will be directly involved in the efforts to pull together on these different areas. And I haven't even mentioned the legislature yet, and the legislature, of course, is a critical partner in this effort as we go forward. The governor's office has been a critical partner in this endeavor, and so there are a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of interested parties, because I have not tried to yet cover all the outside groups that have a tremendous interest in this and are very involved in the advancement of education in this state, and that you could start as easy an identification as the Leandro Commission has spent 2 years working on this, and is a body, for example, that would be most interested in meeting with this board as we try to establish priorities and go forward. And there are many others, some of whom presented earlier today, as a matter of fact. And so we have a lot of work to do, And I say all that because it's important to point out we're in a place where it's not going to be possible to be definite in how we try to assess a budget and what our priority needs are. And there are going to be other people involved in some respects as to how we try to assess what those budget needs are, because there's other interested parties that we want to work with, cooperate with, and do what's in the best interest of our students in this state. So one of the things that, taking now another step back just from a purely budget standpoint, in previous years we've been given, and I say this with no great wealth of experience, but with a little experience, others have even more, but we've been given a target that, bring a proposal that's not more than this amount of money. We don't have that this year. We don't have a target with respect to what we bring forward right now. And I would note, just generally speaking, to the extent we had a target last year, one of the things that's happened, as you all know, is the budget for many education initiatives never got passed, at least to this point. It may get passed at some point, but at this point it's still not passed. And so we're in a little bit different position because a lot of other agencies, at least in the separate bills, did have their budgets passed, and ours is not in that same place. So I think we need to think about this in a flexible manner. And now, if I could suggest this as we talk about it in the following manner, that we have an obligation as the state board to point out what the needs are for our students, whether or not Leandro existed. But in fact, Leandro does exist. And so we have a very high obligation, including now a legal obligation, to make sure we are good reporters to the legislature, to the governor, and to the other bodies with whom we will necessarily have to work to make this all go forward in the best interest of our children. And to be a good reporter, I think what we need to do is to set out what our needs are, with the understanding that the legislature, the governor, and other bodies who are involved in budgetary considerations will necessarily have to make judgments as they go forward, because there are a lot of different components in our state that also require budget funding as well as education. We focus very much on the importance of education in our group, and we should. And one of our obligations then, I think, is to assist in educating the legislature, the public, and all other bodies as to what the needs are as we go forward. So I think in this instance, and what's a very unusual situation for a lot of different reasons, there are going to be recommendations getting made in 60 days, and we don't know what they are as we sit here right now, for how we go forward in the short term, and then it starts to set up in the long term. We have put together a list of priorities that match with our strategic plan, match with the West Ed report, match with the Leandro Commission report. I mean, they're really in alignment. All of them are in alignment. They're not identical. You can't run a copy off and say, well, that's the exact same thing, but they're in alignment with each other. And the basic pillars are in complete alignment in terms of what we're doing. So I think it's important that we serve in this instance as, here are what all the needs are, and identify them. Our staff has done a great job, and I want to thank Barbara Roper, Catherine Johnson, and others for the work they've done to try to price out both what the DPI budgetary items are, but also what the state board proposed items are. And so somebody has to throw something at the dartboard, so if I'm gonna try to start by doing that and suggest what we do is we've priced these items out, and I think we should put this out as this is our ask. These are items that we see as likely Leandro called for items, and then work with and advocate for them. I think we have a real role to educate and advocate here, but we understand we may not get everything that's required, but here's what we know. We know that we took an oath to follow the United States Constitution and the state constitution. We know that obviously the governor took that oath. We know all the legislators took that oath. We all have this requirement. We also know that the way our system of government is set up is that if there's a constitutional issue to be resolved, that's done by our courts. And our courts here have weighed in and are weighing in terms of what the constitutional requirements are. And we all have an obligation to obviously be very mindful of that and be supportive of what our constitutional obligations are, and to be supportive of others as it affects our work. And so I view our obligation as we need to set out what the needs are. We need to work with folks as they set what the priorities are going to be with us. We're an important part of that conversation, because every one of these pillars comes back in some way to the State Board of Education. Even early childhood is defined as birth to grade 3. So we have several of those years. So I think it's important we try to set out all the things that we see, and then work with the bodies that are going to work on budgeting, and work with them as we go through the effort to try to start the Leandro compliant process, and to start a process where we all come together, all these bodies, the legislature, the governor's office, this group, and the many, many, many other groups that care deeply about those who have the least in the world, which is our children, to try to move forward in an educational new world that makes sense in terms of how we best proceed. It makes sense in terms of agreeing on what the needs are, and then we work on how to fund the needs. But we need to agree on what the needs are, and it's our obligation to put those forward. And we are falling short if we don't do that. So I suggest that what we do, and I think something's been sent out by Deanna, but she has sent out a sheet that's got 24 items that have been high priority items for us. with some additional items for support for other agency budget requests that tie with the work that we're doing. And they're grouped in categories of early grades reading, teacher preparation, professional development and pay, principal preparation, professional development and pay, school and district assistance and turnaround, connecting high school to post-secondary and career opportunities, supporting the whole child, increasing NCDPI support positions, and that's also in the NCDPI budgetary, some of what the needs are for their budget, and we are supportive of some of those needs, and actually could name a couple others, including some State Board of Education needs that we would be supportive of. So those are all set out on this sheet, not on a sheet of paper for you, but for me, old school, set out on this sheet of paper. You also have in your materials a pricing for all the, or costing analysis, which is an estimate. I want to emphasize that's an estimate and not easy to do, which is why we really appreciate the time and effort staff put into it. To what these costs would be, we need to be facile, because we can put forward this budget. We know it's not going to look exactly like what we asked for. No budget ever does, but in particular, this one may not. But we need to be able to advance the things that are needed and put them out there and give some sense of what the cost might be, and then refine it further as we go forward. So, for purposes of a dartboard, there you have it. We do not have, last comment, we do not have teacher pay in there, as we have not in the last couple of years, specifically, other than to say enhancing teacher pay is an important priority of the board. The West Ed report suggested that we reach the number one, a place where the number one in the Southeast is for teacher pay. That happens to be Georgia right now. And that would require a 2-year period under the West Ed proposal to try to reach that place. An alternative proposal is to try to reach the average of the United States. That would require a 4-year effort because of the amount of money per year it would require in an increase in terms of our budget. And I think we all know if it takes 4 years, when we get there, that number will have moved, but it will be a good faith effort towards significant progress. So that's already out there in recommendations, and that, I think, our board's place is to support strongly educator compensation, and frankly also our classified employee compensation, which too often gets overlooked. And I think we as a body are very supportive of that, and I think the information is going to be out there to help guide what makes sense in the very competitive world we are in for educators, and that information is available as well in terms of what that would take if you went 2 years to the Southeast, what would the increase to match number one in the Southeast, or 4 years to reach average. We've got that information and we can provide it, but I think our focus should be on what are the programs that make a difference in the areas we have got to make a difference in for our kids, and then we're wholly supportive of the efforts for increased in teacher compensation, principal compensation, all educator compensation, classified employee compensation, within the confines of understanding all the needs of the state. But these are important constitutional needs. That's been emphasized. We have an obligation with respect to those important constitutional needs to make sure they're fulfilled. If not now, when? If not now, why? It's time. And we have an important role, and I think we need to take that on. So I throw that out for consideration and any thoughts people have.
Amen.
Reggie's a preacher.
Hey, Darren.
Well, please.
Well, as usual, Vice Chair Duncan, you've done a great job of not only presenting the specifics, which is really the input we got from board members and other stakeholders about what our budget should be, but the context and the reasons why we should support every one of these budgetary items. So, and I fully support your proposed strategy for the board that we move forward with every one of these at this time and advocate for every one as we continue to develop a plan in response to Leandro, as we continue to work with our education partners in the legislature with developing agreement on what needs to be done for the benefit of our students and how we leverage the substantial resources that our state has to fund these items.
And to be clear, to be flexible and nimble with that, because it's not gonna look exactly like we're seeing it, but we need to be flexible and nimble. And I think we're in good shape to do that because of the work staff's done to help us cost this out. And so, and recognize and be sensitive to the fact that funding bodies have a multitude of requests that are being made to them. We just have to help prioritize how important this particular request is at this time for the funding bodies who have to make those judgments, and do so with respect. All right. Not seeing any other comments. My dartboard at least is in the room. That's okay. I'm worried about it being in the zip code, never mind the room. Anyway, we welcome ongoing discussions, and as you can see, this is still something we can work through. We are going to have modifications of this as we go forward. Whether we want to or not, we'll have modifications, and we may well want to as we see how this develops. And our council will keep us closely advised to how the Leandro submissions for March 30th are looking, and that will be a real guide to us as well, I think. All right, that then brings us to BizOp 5, which is now a discussion item and not an action item. This is the proposed GOVR 007, which is supervision and administration of state and federal education funds to support North Carolina's general and uniform system of free public schools. And this is an effort to adopt a clearer rule about budget support and assistance as we go forward in terms of for the board's role in how we work through budget issues. As you recall, we distributed it last month for the board to start its effort at consideration of it. If you have had a chance to look at it in the materials, you will see it's been revised since you first saw it last month. And the revisions are a culmination of a lot of discussion that we've had with staff members who've made some just excellent recommendations, and they have been incorporated. Many of those have been incorporated into Modify. We want to get something that works and makes sense. And so I'm appreciative again to staff for the thought they put into it. And in addition, board members have also put in some thoughts and commentaries. And so we've tried to be adjusting to that. This is not an item for voting today, but it is an item for more input today and or next month. It will be our hope to get it to a place next month where we'd be voting to approve the policy. But in the meantime, we are open to input from board members and continuing input from staff to make this the best policy that we possibly can, with the proviso that we can always do some revisions, and likely we'll have to as we encounter circumstances that cause us to say, well, wait a minute, we might not have been made that or accounted for that, and if that's the case, then we'll make further adjustments to the policy. But right now, it'd be really helpful if anybody has comments on proposed adjustments to the policy or language of the policy as it sits right now. And you do get a pass, you get another month to consider it if you if you need it. But we welcome input that you send us, whether here or later, but and we'll have a chance to discuss it before we vote on it in another month. Yes, Mr.
Chairman,
President.
thank you. Two comments. One, I think this positions the board and the department, and let me be clear, I'm talking about the board that is populated by anyone sitting in these seats and a department populated by anyone sitting in either the superintendent seat or the leadership roles. It positions a working relationship and a clarity and a transparency and an accountability around the use of funds against the plans and goals and expectations. And so I think it positions and structures the right relationship. And so I appreciate, having read through it, the work on it. There's only one area, and I'm not clear exactly where it goes. And so I just give it to you as a suggested language, but something that makes clear that in our work that when funds are appropriated by the General Assembly of the federal government, that's how we spend them. And that funds appropriated by those bodies must be spent for those purposes. And if there is a different way that those funds are going to be expended, then the department and the board should be on the same page. And I do not believe that cuts down on any flexibility. I think that keeps us on the right side of the law. And it's not clear to me that that's clear in the policy. And I think there's room for that kind of clarity in the relationship between the board and the department. And so I would just suggest for Chairman Duncan and the budget staff of the department, just some wording which makes that expectation clear.
We'll be glad to work on that. Other comments? All right, thank you very much. That brings us to Biz Op 6. This is a small modification to the contract procedure, which again is not for vote this month, but would be next month for vote. The modifications are essentially two. We had a dollar limit under the policy of $1 million. And we have not seen many, and I need to be clear, this may have been atypical because of the budgetary situation this year, but we have not seen many contracts between $500,000 and $1 million. We thought we might see, we had some concern we would see a lot of those, and so to have it a $500,000 number might overburden the board, if you will, to looking at the contracts for approval purposes, but we have not seen many to this point. If that changes, again, as we've said, we're in a position to modify it back in another direction. But at this point, the recommendation is to change that amount from $1 million to $500,000. The second modification in there is to take into account emergency contracts, which frankly we did not do in the first drafting of this rule with respect to the contracts. So, and now we've realized we in fact have dealt with some emergency contract situations this year. So that's, the addition there is basically taking the statutory language and putting it into the policy so that we make it clear we're following the statutory policy that's set out for emergency contracts as our guiding light for our rule in terms of how we deal with that when it arises. So those are the only basic changes. Again, you've got time to review this and think this one's much easier to look at probably because you've seen this rule and you're pretty familiar with it, and these changes are not significant in scope or nature. But welcome comments on it as well. And welcome any if you have one right now, or glad to take them over the course of next month as we get up to and through our meeting. All right, not seeing any hands. Our next item is update on contracts. We've got an executed contracts report and a planned contracts report. I have not heard from anyone this month who had a question about either of those. Sometimes we do. So unless there's a question on either of those items, which we welcome if there are, I think you have all that information. Is there a question that anyone has? All right, not seeing any. We also have our monthly update on the agency vacancy report, and again, thanks to the staff, I think the report has now found a place where I think we have the information we want on a monthly basis. It's put together and constructed well, and there's been good response in getting us to this place, and so we're thankful for that assistance. You will note there are a little bit of an increase in vacancies, not as, and we still are working on, and the status is listed on where the work is on filling a number of the vacancies that we do have as part of the report. But I have not heard any questions about this as well either. It's important for us to monitor. And in that regard, I do want to say, given that there are vacancies, I appreciate the hard work that so many staff members are putting in, because a lot of staff members are doing an awful lot of work because of some of the vacancies that do exist. And we're very appreciative of that. Not seeing anything or having heard anything on that, we have the always exciting consent items. And we have two of those. Double your fun. One of them is the Biz Op 8 is the certification of finance officers. We again do have new certifications on finance officers. The second one is the board has a an appointment that it can make for a local school board member to serve on the Task Force for Safer Schools, the statewide task force. And we're in a place where we now need to appoint someone to that position. Our previous appointments term has run out. The recommendation from staff has been to appoint Patrick formerly. He is a board member on the Guilford County Board of Education. I can speak from experience to this, he's an excellent board member. He's very responsible and responsive. And he has over a period of time demonstrated a real interest in school safety issues in terms of that local school district, as well as, I should add, for his benefit, he's tremendously interested and worked a lot on CTE issues, although that's not directly germane to this. He's very focused on that. So that's the recommendation, and if anybody wants to talk further about Pat, that's great. I'd be glad to speak with you since I do know him. But that's the proposal, and that would be up on consent agenda tomorrow. And that completes our report, Mr. Chair. I think we made up for Mr. Buxton running on and on.
That was Amy. That was Amy Olivia.
Not me.
Well done, Mr. Duncan, once again.
We all had a hand in that.
So that concludes our committee meetings for the day. I thank every member of the staff and board members for your work today. Before we go into closed session, we want to pause for a moment and express a word of gratitude to two of our former colleagues who many of us would acclaim them as champions of public education, perhaps even greatest of all time champions of public education. And it's certainly fitting that at the end of what might seem like a rather long day with many challenging decisions and difficult issues, that we would pay tribute to these two former colleagues. Well, I can assure you, you'll get no sympathy from them. Having served 2 full 8-year terms, plus 2 years of extra credit, they must just not have gotten enough fun around here. But the reality is that tens of thousands of our students and every North Carolinian across this state have been the beneficiaries of the tireless, selfless, dedicated service of our two champions. And I think the example that they have set for all of us behooves us to rededicate ourselves to their cause, which is ensuring, defending, and expanding the right of every North Carolinian to a sound basic education as prescribed in our Constitution. So to begin our expressions of gratitude, would you join me in thanking Tricia Willoughby and Wayne McDivitt? So honor us to come forward for just a moment, and while we have other expressions, both, please. First, to formally express our appreciation to Tricia, I'm going to call on J.B. Buxton to read a formal statement on our behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's my privilege and honor to read this about one of my mentors, Tricia Nickens Willoughby. For outstanding service to the North Carolina State Board of Education from July 2001 to April 2019. Whereas the North Carolina State Board of Education takes pride in the extraordinary qualities and dedication of the citizens who have served as members of the North Carolina State Board of Education. And whereas Ms. Tricia Nickens Willoughby, a former public school teacher, has reflected those qualities in an exceptional manner during her service with the State Board of Education as a member, serving multiple committees as a committee chair, co-chair, and vice chair, facilitating her wide array of knowledge and expertise on many board topics. And whereas Tricia Willoughby's unique position of serving as the first woman state superintendent of public instruction through appointment by Governor Michael Easley enabled Ms. Willoughby to experience the intricacies and challenges of administration of the Department of Public Instruction that further enriched her as a member when she resumed her service on the board and gave her the platform to model the ideal collaborative partnership between a state superintendent and the State Board of Education and the benefit that would ensue. And whereas the board thanks Ms. Willoughby for her early recognition and push to focus on the link between educational success and a child's health and safety, and her determination to engage the board frequently on policy and program initiatives through the Whole Child Initiative to develop and strengthen programs designed to maximize academic and personal outcomes for all children. And whereas board members pay tribute to Tricia Nickens Willoughby's personal sign at her board seat each month that read, quote, "It is all about the children," unquote, and that it reflects her deep caring for children and her fierce protection of their right to expect North Carolina to live up to its constitutional promise of equal opportunities for all in a general and uniform system of schools. And whereas the board praises Ms. Willoughby for her work as the executive director of the North Carolina Business Committee for Education and her relentless work to focus the committee on the benefits of its support and understanding of public education and the issues impacting public education and their inevitable link to the economic prosperity of North Carolina and its citizens. And whereas State Board of Education members acknowledge the contribution of Ms. Willoughby's undergraduate education at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, her graduate education at Meredith College, and her work as a faculty member at Meredith College on the deep impact that she was able to render through her informed opinions, ideas, and conversations as she proved to be a soft-spoken but tough-minded board member. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the North Carolina State Board of Education commend Ms. Tricia Nickens Willoughby for her dedicated service in performing her many roles on the North Carolina State Board of Education, committee chair, committee vice chair, committee co-chair, as a truly dedicated, long-serving member, and resolved that the board recognizes and appreciates her untiring, selfless work for 18 years in championing policies and programs in the best interests of public school students and educators, for a cooperative, collaborative leadership with the State Board of Education while serving as state superintendent, and resolved that the board wishes for Ms. Willoughby, her husband, her daughters, her sons-in-law, and her grandchildren much happiness and success in the future, and resolved that the board members express great gratitude to Ms. Willoughby for modeling the best of public service to the board and to the state of North Carolina as a strong and respected leader in public education and a person of strong faith, and directs the Secretary of the State Board of Education to enter a copy of this resolution into the official minutes of the North Carolina State Board of Education, and an appropriately signed copy of this resolution shall be presented to Tricia Willoughby.
And now, in like manner, I'll call on our now most senior member of the State Board of Education, Mr. Keenan, to express our gratitude to Mr. McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gives me a great honor to be able to do this. As I was thinking about when you said the GOAT, I said, well, let me think about this. I never met Michael Jordan. He's supposed to be the GOAT of basketball. I never met Jim Brown. He's the GOAT of football. But I get a chance to see two GOATs today, two GOATs of education. So it's the first time I get to meet a GOAT. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne McDivitt, for outstanding service to the North Carolina State Board of Education from July 2001 to April 2019. Whereas the North Carolina State Board of Education takes great pride in the outstanding qualities and dedication of North Carolina citizens who serve public education as members of the board. Whereas Wayne McDivitt has reflected many outstanding qualities in an extraordinary manner during his service as a member of the North Carolina State Board of Education, including his role as board vice chairman and chair and co-chair of many board committees. And whereas his lifelong dedication to public service in North Carolina, not only as a State Board of Education member, but also as the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Chief of Staff to Governor James B. Hunt, Vice President of University Affairs at the University of North Carolina System, and Senior Vice Chancellor at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, has earned him the respect of citizens statewide in North Carolina, especially in his beloved Western North Carolina. And whereas Mr. McDevitt's breadth of knowledge and experience from his varied career as a leader in many settings contributed significantly to his worldview of students' futures and his subsequent shepherding of global education initiatives to establish awareness that those who are not prepared for global future will be relentlessly punished by it. And whereas his steadfast belief in North Carolina's promise in its Constitution to the privilege of education and the state's duty to guard and maintain that right kept him focused each month on protecting and sustaining the board's role as part of that promise. Whereas Wayne McDevitt's lengthy and diverse public service yielded him an extra portion of wisdom and insight that served his fellow board members well when he often took the lead to bring intense and arduous debates at the table to reasonable conclusions and sometimes agreements to disagree, knowing that the shared vision of the board was more significant than any disagreements. And whereas Mr. McDevitt's dedication to his service as a board member can be measured in many ways, including his near-perfect attendance over 18 years, his monthly meetings with superintendents in his education region where he encouraged all gloves-off conversations to allow candid, productive exchanges of ideas, complaints, and feedback on public education issues, and the respect he showed to his fellow board members and staff. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of the North Carolina State Board of Education commend Wayne McDevitt for his dedicated service in many roles in education and throughout state government as a true and tireless dedicated professional, and resolve that the board recognizes and appreciates his wisdom, leadership, and resolve to protect, defend, and advocate for public education across the state throughout on the State Board of Education, and resolve that the board wishes for Wayne McDevitt and his wife and his son and daughter, his daughter-in-law and his son-in-law, and his grandchildren much happiness in the future, and that the board is confident that Wayne McDevitt's mother and father, who filled him with faith, are looking down and saying, "Job well done, son," and resolve that board members express great gratitude to Wayne McDevitt for his service to the board and to the state of North Carolina as an indisputable and respected leader who has made his mark on the great state of North Carolina, directs that the Secretary to the State Board of Education to enter a copy of this resolution into the official minutes of the North Carolina State Board of Education, and that an appropriately signed copy of this resolution shall be presented to Mr. Wayne McDevitt.
If I could ask any former board members, superintendents that are in the audience, please come forward to join us in a photo with our two goats. No, bring that.
Bring it with you, okay.
Yeah, you got more to carry home.
Okay, yes.
Please come forward, all board members, advisors.
Come on down.
We're so proud of y'all. Hey there. Good to see you. Hello, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you. How you doing? Good to see you. Hello, Mr. Chair. All right, good to see you. What's up, brother? How are you?
Greg Alcoa, can I say hello to you guys?
Okay, Ray, good to see you. Tell us what you did. You all right?
It's easy. I know exactly what I get. Carolina. Mr. Smith, I can't hear you. Are you in?
I will do that. I sure will. You know my best side. Turn side, turn
You only
all
have a
over.
right side.
Turn all over.
Oh.
I knew that, but I forgot.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Hey, buddy, you look good, brother.
Yeah, got us all out here today.
You must shop a lot.
Family goes there. It seems like
Oh, that's funny.
Great.
Are you staying for the dinner?
Yeah, break it.
Me too. I go see my babies.
Well, no doubt we saved the best for last on this day, but it's not quite over. We'd like to give Wayne and Tricia a chance to make some remarks, and before I turn it over to Ms. Willoughby, you know, it's hard to think of Wayne McDivitt and Tricia Willoughby without thinking of expanding our students' horizons to go global to the benefit of the whole child, the whole school, and the whole community. Those were just two of the many initiatives for our students that the two of y'all championed, and we're forever grateful. So, Ms. Willoughby, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I told the chairman I was really glad that my husband was able to come and hear all that because, you know, that's good. But seriously, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, board colleagues, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the beautiful resolution, and JB, thank you for your reading of it into the minutes and for all the very nice and humbling things that were said there. I do want to thank my husband because I'm glad he could be here because I thank him for his support during the many hours of discussion about public education over the nearly 47 years we've been married.
Oh, wow.
Even longer than I was on the state board. And to the staff of the department, those of you who fill this room every month, thank you for your deep conviction that our constitutional responsibility to ensure that every child has the opportunity for a sound basic education is important. Your commitment to that is essential. To the governors, to the chairs, to the former superintendents and former colleagues on this board, I thank you. And I'm just thrilled that a couple of those chairs are here and some former superintendent and lots of other folks who are so important to the years I spent here. To say it was a privilege and an honor to serve on the board and for nearly a year as state superintendent is a wild understatement. For most of those 18 years, I really enjoyed the respectful ways we discussed issues and challenges. The goal at this table was always to build consensus around the best ideas brought by board members, by stakeholders across the state, and by the professional staff who worked here during that time. The focus of those best discussions was always on children. And I did keep that little sign in front of me, and when I left, I bequeathed it to JB. So it's easy. It's easy to get distracted, and it's important to keep that focus. We know that the nature of the work in this room is dynamic. It wasn't finished when I got here in 2001, nor when I left in 2019. We need to keep moving North Carolina forward to be better and better so that every child in this state has the same opportunities that I wanted for my children and that I now want for my grandchildren. But I am happy to be a part of a group who work together collaboratively. I appreciate that mention in the resolution because that was a big part of what I thought we needed to do. People who weren't concerned about personal agendas but focused on the power of public education. Disruptions like Learn and Earn Early College programs are still paying dividends today to students. More at 4, now NC Pre-K data proves positively that intervening with at-risk 4-year-olds is what matters and keeps them from falling behind once they went to school. We live in a state whose past leaders have given us giant shoulders to stand upon. Leaders who had courage to fund public education during the Great Depression because they knew that was the path of progress for our state. Then, as today, we were preparing students for jobs that didn't exist. Among other things, we had leaders who created the first public university system, the first public art museum, the Research Triangle Park, the list goes on and on. When we have a consistent commitment to values that guide us, we as policymakers will make decisions that are best for the common good and uphold the dignity of our fellow human beings, children and adults alike. As with most things, we move faster and more significantly when we work together. One of my favorite stories, thank you for the segue to Michael Jordan, Reggie. One of my very favorite stories, true or not, is about when Michael Jordan, former Tar Heel, played for the Chicago Bulls. One night he scored 52 points in a basketball game. So with about a minute left, the coach took him out so he could be properly acknowledged for this great feat. And in to replace him came a rookie, first NBA game. He gets to come in for that last minute. He gets fouled. He scores 1 point of those foul shots, thereby scoring his very first NBA points. So after the game in the locker room, the reporters are swarming around Michael Jordan. Everybody wants to talk to him about those 52 points he scored. But one reporter wandered over to the rookie and said, "What do you hope people remember about tonight?" He said, "I hope if they remember this is the night that Michael Jordan and I scored 53 points." So thank you. I say thank you to Governors Easley and Perdue for appointing me to serve on this state board, where together we scored some points, but we knew there were more games to play, bigger challenges to address, and more students to serve as we continue to move our beloved state forward. Thank you so much for this honor, and I almost got through it without getting emotional, but it means so much to me, and I really appreciate the work that you all continue to do here every month. Thank you.
Reggie, thank you for the goat thing. I get called a goat every morning. I'm not sure that's what my wife means when she calls me a goat, so thank you for that. Tricia and I left here, about 8 or 10 months ago, and you got new chairs, you've got sophisticated technology. I'm not sure what happened, Tricia. Thank you for the resolution. It is so good to see you guys. I say that in all sincerity. I miss you. Miss what we're about. I miss those things. I don't miss enough to come back, but I do miss that. And I will tell you, and I hope you've figured it out. With Donna, you traded up, and you're going to have a great board member, and she is a great board member, and I say that in all sincerity. Thank you, too, for what you do and who you are. What you're doing is important work. It's vital. I do say a special thank you to Tricia, who has been my seatmate and partner for 18 years on this board. But a special thank you to all of those board members that I've been able to serve with in you for your friendship, for your partnership, and for your stewardship to this board. I do, too, want to thank the staff, the professional staff. Specifically, I want to mention Rebecca Garland and Betsy West and Martez, and, of course, Deanna. Thank you for your hard work and all you do, and so many others that are in this room, and I'd better not start down that path. I saw some of them in the room today, particularly some of the attorneys, and I thank you for that. I also want to say a word of thanks to the local superintendents out in Western North Carolina, who I started 18 years ago meeting with once a month no holds barred, no rules, no cameo appearances, meet for 2 hours every month. And they said recently, thank you to me. I would say that there's absolutely no doubt that they made me a better board member, both in the times that they were able to share with me coming in what we were talking about, how it would affect the classroom, but also those things where I was dug in and just simply said, look, I appreciate your opinion, but I have a different one. And for that, we had a great partnership, and I do want to say thank you. I've been so blessed. Reggie was able to say some of those things that I've been able to have an opportunity for service over the years, and I have been blessed with family, with place, and with friends, and blessed to be able to serve. I consider the service on the State Board of Education, without a close second, to be the most important opportunity of service to impact communities, kids, families. It makes a difference. So all of those things that you heard, being on this board has greater opportunity for that than anything else. Your service matters. What you do here matters. Our public schools matter. Our teachers matter. Our kids matter. You make a difference. And I've attempted to serve during those years with 4 guiding principles. And I think it was the guiding principles at this table. One was collaboration, and that's hard. That's much harder than the heavy hand. To collaborate, to meet with the advocates, to meet with educators, and with nonprofits in the business community and others, so that we collaborate. Collaboration. Second's commitment, and commitment to be here, to be prepared, to read the material, and to do the research. Be committed to high standards and rigor. And third, civility. Yes, collaboration, commitment, civility. The issues that we face and the consequences of those issues are too important for us to not have civil discourse, for us not to have the kind of civil conversations that we have to have, and to learn from each other and to listen to each other. That has been a hallmark of this board. And then finally, for me, constituent service. As you know, I'm from Western North Carolina. It's a long ways from Raleigh. And so that outreach to the people in the region was important. You know, Reggie read a couple of numbers, so I'm going to give you a bunch of numbers real quick. Try to put these in your head very quickly, because I'm going to go through them. 18 years ago, I was 47 years old. 0, that's the number of meetings that I missed in 18 years. Whether it was snow or rain or sickness, missed no meetings. 30% of my life was on this State Board of Education. 40% of my adult life, although some would say I'm not an adult, it's been on this board. 216 months, 6,671 days. 600 miles round trip from home, approximately 165,000 miles over those years. About 2,000 days devoted to board work, 8 to 10 days a month, and 3 to 10 days away from home. One room at our home, my son's room, has been converted into the state boardroom for the last 18 years. And there are stacks of everything in there you can imagine. I mean, literally stacks. And before we went paperless, you already remember, we were getting 3 feet of mailings a month. They're all in that room. That we're gonna. So, 17 and 21, the age of my children in 2001. 36 and 40, the age of my children today. 5, 2.5, 1.5, and 5 weeks, the age of my 4 grandchildren. One wife of 47 years, and she's here today. And I will say this without a doubt, it's been the best years of her life. Life happens. I'm getting to talk right now, so this is my story. 2, he mentioned about my parents. I was at this board table 10 years ago. My parents died 3 months apart. And at this board table, when they passed away in 2010, and we could go on and on. Life happens during the 18 years, and you kind of think this can cause you to reflect on this at 5 o'clock this morning as I was doing this. Dozens of legislative sessions, 2 confirmations, approximately 70,000 emails, calls, and letters, hundreds of thousands of pages of reading and study and prep, dozens of initiatives and required processes, things like No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, ESSA, and accounting models, and on we could go. Dozens of standards updates, reviews, revisions, and adoptions, 35 board retreats, dozens of panels, speaking engagements, ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, and I'll pause for a second to give you one particular number, 911. This board on 911, that's become a different thing than 911 used to be, but on 911, this board was in retreat. Phil Kirk was with us. We were at the North Carolina Center for Advancement of Teaching out there at Western Carolina University. And I recall vividly them coming in and whispering to Phil that there had been a plane crash. And then a little later coming in, and it became obvious that it was serious. And so we took a recess and then eventually adjourned in that retreat. But those places never leave your mind. And during those days, I was with the Board of Education. Tricia and I were out there together on 911. Give you another list. 4 governors. I was on the board through 4 governors. I say that because it's the 5th governor who calls me once a week and tells me what we are doing right and wrong all those times. 5 great board chairs. I do not want to understate that. 5 great board chairs. 3 of them are in this room. Eric, thank you for your leadership. When I came on the board, I was gifted to have a great board chair in Phil Kirk. Phil was my mentor, so anything I did wrong, it was Phil's fault. And then I had the privilege of becoming friends with a great board chair in Bill Kobe, a great friend, and a great board chair, but also a great man, a good man. And for that, I have been privileged. 4 state superintendents, over 100 colleagues at this table, over 100 local superintendents, not one superintendent who was there at that first meeting when I met with them 18 years ago are still working. All are retired. Visits to 71 of the state's LEAs and over 400 schools, chaired, as he said earlier, several of those meetings. I'll leave you with 2 numbers before I leave the numbers. One is 1.5. And you know what it is, 1.5 million kids in our schools. And the other number is 1. Every single child, not 1.5, but each and every child. If I could leave you with, I loved what you're doing with your strategic planning. If I could leave you with a couple of words, is just be ridiculous. Be ridiculous. On July 4th, I was sitting there thinking it had to have been ridiculous for those guys to say, let's break away from the British Empire. Somebody in that room said, that's ridiculous. And somebody else said, yeah, let's be ridiculous. When you say to somebody, every child can read, every child can succeed, each child can do that, and they say, well, that's ridiculous. Be ridiculous. Just be ridiculous. Nod and say, yeah, it's ridiculous. Be ridiculous. It's ridiculous to say North Carolina can be the greatest state of the 50. Let's be ridiculous as we lead into the future. Folks, finally, North Carolina is a great state, and we have great public schools. We have great universities, community college, early childhood education. We have great public schools. Commitment to them has been, over the years, the 1930s, in the Depression, we raised taxes to keep the schools open. In the 60s, we put a tax on food. Can you imagine what they went through in those days to do that? And yes, a commitment to this, to education in this state. Things like, and Tricia mentioned several of them, I'll add a couple to that, Teaching Fellows, the North Carolina Center for Advancement of Teaching, the School of Science and Math. I'll repeat early college because how great that program is, and innovative high schools, and STEM schools, and whole child, and yes, global education. And great things continue to happen in our public schools. And for those who don't think so, I would encourage them to go visit a school. Go to a classroom and spend the day with a teacher in a classroom and just watch the magic going on in that classroom. And it will change that. Attend a graduation and watch the celebration at a graduation as all of those kids and families celebrate that. Finally, there were 3 things in this room, always present, that helped me focus and brought context. One was Tricia sat beside me, and that note was always in my face. Kids. Focus on the kids. The second one is at the front of the room. The people have a right to the privilege of education, and it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right. And third are the names on these walls back here. From time to time, I would come into this room over the years, and the room was empty, and I would read some of those names, some of those people, and I know we've got schools across the state named for, so we got towns named for some of these folks. And you go back in there and you look and you say, gee, that was in the 30s, that was during the war. And by the way, I know that guy's grandson. And you look at those people and see lieutenant governors and treasurers and people who was there, and you say, what was it like to lead at that time? And my prayer, my hope is that, and I would say to you that the real measure of our stewardship is if 30 or 40 or 50 years from now, people go to the walls and look at our names and they say, job well done. That they say that those leaders during the first 2 to 3 decades of the century, that they were bold and they were visionary, and they were willing to make the tough decisions and fight the tough fights, and they were up to the task during some very challenging times. And that those folks back then may have saved public schools. You know something? When I look around this table at you folks, I'm optimistic about that. I think we're going to be just fine. Again, thank you, and thank you for the recognition, and thank you for your service.
Well, Wayne and Tricia, to you and your spouses, we thank you so much for your service to our children, and even more, each of us personally thank you for the friendships and the relationships we've had with you, and we look forward to continuing those in the future. So I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon and continuing to express our gratitude to both of you. So, back to business. I ask for a motion to go into closed session, and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, the February 5th, 2020 meeting will adjourn immediately. Vice Chair Duncan.
I move that the State Board of Education go into closed session to consult with our attorneys to discuss personnel matters. Information is privileged and confidential pursuant to 09 NCAC 06B.0103, confidentiality of solicitation documents, and 09 NCAC 06B.0309 evaluation, and other attorney-client privilege matters, including Hope County versus State of North Carolina and North Carolina State Board of Education, Dominski versus North Carolina State Board of Education and Pitt County Board of Education, Rodriguez and Flores Guerrero versus North Carolina State Board of Education et al., Amplify Education, Inc. versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and iStation, Candy Killian Wood versus NCDPI, Kinetic Minds Inspire, LLC, and Escabana Henderson versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, Kinetic Minds, LLC, and Denise Henderson versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, U.S. Educational Technology Purchasing Alliance versus State Board of Education.
Motion by Mr. Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Keenan. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Ms. Camden?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes, motion carries. We will regather in closed session at 4:50 in the room behind us.